Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku chose Eri over the League? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Kaken's words kept repeating over and over again in Izuku's mind. If you want to be a hero so bad, why don't you make it easier for yourself and take a swan dive off the roof? Maybe you'll have a quirk in your next life. Izuku's stomach twisted as he clutched his notebook to his chest, the wind whipping around him and ruffling his hair, his clothes billowing. Flipping through the pages, he found the page All Might had signed. Even All Might, the person Izuku looked up to most in the world, had told him he couldn't be a hero. Even when Izuku had run in to save Kaken from the slime villain, they'd all looked down on him. All the heroes, even All Might, had scolded him for getting involved. Then at school the following week, Kaken had attacked him, going as far as to set off some small explosions against his skin, leaving burns. His classmates had laughed, saying it was pointless for him to have tried to do anything to save Kaken. Izuku thought maybe things would get better in high school. He applied to UA, trying for the hero department. But on the day of the exam, while he handed in his forms, he was turned away at the door by a member of the administration. Quirkless? It'd be far too dangerous for you to be in the hero exam. You would be a liability not only to yourself but to the others in the exam. If you would like to apply for the other programs, you can, but I simply can't let you apply for the hero department. But what was the point of going to UA if he couldn't be a hero? So he applied for a school closer to home, hoping that he would be able to stay under the radar and avoid the bullies. Kaken would be going to UA, so maybe the others would leave him alone. On the first day, it became evident that a power vacuum had formed in Kaken's absence. His old cronies were vying for the position of top dog, and the easiest way to do that was to go after Izuku. They picked on him, becoming crueler and crueler to prove themselves. They eventually sorted themselves out and Izuku found himself at the bottom of the pecking order. He was the butt of every joke and the odd man out. At home, it wasn't much better. Not that his mother bullied him, of course. His mother was kind, but she did not understand Izuku sometimes. She couldn't imagine him as a hero. Every time something bad happened at UA, like the USJ attack or the attack at their summer camp, she would remind him about how it was a good thing that he didn't get into his dream school, that it was better that he avoided heroics. Then he would hear her calling Mitsuki Bakugu at night, praising Kaken, saying how it was amazing that Kaken was near the top of his class and how it was amazing that Kaken managed to narrowly avoid being kidnapped at the summer camp. She praised how aggressive Kaken was, not only against the villains during the attacks, but also against his classmates at the sports festival. All Izuku ever heard was how amazing Kaken was and how he was going to be the #1 hero one day. And maybe Kaken could be a good hero, but he wasn't a good person. That much was clear. He needed to grow up before he could be a great hero. Yet he got all the praise and Izuku was looked down on. He was called weak by everyone, if not in words then in actions, like how his mother treated him like he was fragile. And so, after a particularly bad day at school, Izuku took a walk. Somehow, he managed to find himself back at that building where he had spoken to All Might all those months ago. He took one last moment to look at All Might's signature before he went back to flipping through the pages. Izuku kept going until he came to a blank one. Riffling through his backpack, he found a pen and wrote a short note to his mother, telling her he was sorry for everything, before bookmarking the page and putting it into his backpack. He swung the bag onto his back, figuring that the notebook would be safe in there and would be easy to find. Shaking, Izuku stepped up to the edge of the roof and looked down. The ground seemed so far away, the skyscraper towering over everything. If you want to be a hero so bad, why don't you make it easier for yourself and take a swan dive off the roof? Maybe you'll have a quirk in your next life. He took one last deep breath before stepping off. For a moment he felt weightless. Time stood still. Then, the wind picked up, and the ground started to come up to meet him. And then, Izuku realized. He didn't want to die. He'd never wanted to die. He'd made a mistake. Izuku opened his mouth to scream, but before a sound came out, a black void yawned open in the air, swallowing him whole. He slammed into a wooden floor and tumbled across it, slamming into a bar stool. The stool crashed down onto him, adding extra bruises to his body. His backpack burst open and all of his things scattered across the floor, making an even bigger mess. Izuku let out a yelp as he slammed into the side of what he at first thought was a wall, but was actually the side of a bar. What the F dash? Where'd he come from? A scratchy, thin voice said. I thought you opened the warp gate in the middle of the sky? A rough voice chimed in. What was he doing in midair? A high giggle cut through the air. I think he's kind of cute. Everything was blurry and dim as Izuku managed to pry his eyes open. A face came into focus as someone leaned over him, looking down with furrowed, concerned brows over thick-rimmed sunglasses. Shockingly red hair swayed over him as everything finally stopped spinning. You okay there, kid? Izuku nodded, taking a shaky breath before trying to speak. Thank you. I think you saved my life. Magna, give him some space, a rich voice said as footsteps approached. I have some water here for him. A man knelt next to him and held out a glass of cool water. As Izuku looked over to thank him, he felt his throat tighten in panic. It was Kurogiri, one of the villains from the USJ attack. The one he had seen pictures of on the news. Stifling a scream, Izuku scrambled backwards over the bar stool and plastered himself against the bar. You recognize me. That complicates things. Shigaraki, send the Nomu out. We don't need to freak him out even more, Magna said. You're not the boss of me. Shut up and do what she says, you crusty but the rough voice said. Izuku glanced past Kurogiri to see that the speaker was a tall man with black hair and a multitude of scars ranging over his body, leaving him disfigured. His body language seemed disinterested, but his sharp blue eyes seemed to catalog everything. Beside him was the infamous leader of the League of Villains, Tamura Shigaraki. The head of the villains was dressed in plain clothes, which weren't all that intimidating really. He looked rather monochrome, except for the bright red shoes on his feet, which looked startlingly similar to Izuku's own. Behind the two men was a massive winged Nomu, its rolling eyes locked on Izuku. Tears welled in Izuku's eyes as he pressed himself even further against the bar and whimpered. Please. I swear I won't tell anyone. You don't need to kill me, I promise. Slow your roll, kid, Magna said, taking the water from Kurogiri and coming closer to Izuku to hand it to him. Let's start from the beginning. Do you have a flight quirk or something? Is that why you were in the air? Izuku shook his head as he took the water with shaking hands. Okay, then why were you up there? The scarred man said as Shigaraki ushered the Nomo from the room. As he came back, he started poking through Izuku's things, which were spread across the floor. How did we save your life? Said a blonde girl as she skipped into view. It became clear that she was the one with the high-pitched voice that spoke before. Past her were three other men, one with a lizard mutation quirk, one in a mask and top hat, and one in a full bodysuit and mask. I was falling. From where? He didn't fall off anything, Shigaraki said, stepping up to Izuku and holding up his notebook. He'd opened it to the bookmarked page, his suicide note. He jumped. Kid was trying to kill himself. A look flitted across Magna's face. It was something sad and laced with pity and understanding. Oh hun, why would you do that? She asked. Ugh, Shigaraki said, flipping through the notebook and landing on the page with All Might's signature. An All Might fanboy, huh? Disgusting. He ripped out the page before letting his pinky, the last of his fingers, touch the page, disintegrating it to dust. I don't like All Might anymore. Izuku said, both defensively and desperately. That caught the villain's attention. He gestured for Izuku to keep talking while he tossed the notebook aside. The scarred man picked up the notebook and started to read. I met All Might once, and he told me I could never be a hero, even though I really wanted to be one. I guess he was right. But I looked up to him since I was a little kid, you know? Then he just crushed my dream like it was nothing. I don't hate him for it, but I don't really like him either. And he just left me on a rooftop. The rooftop I just jumped off actually. And my friend, or I guess my bully, had told me earlier that day to kill myself by jumping off a roof, and for a second, I thought about doing it. I didn't, which was a good thing, but everything just kept getting worse and worse, and today I guess I finally broke. With a choked-off sob, Izuku buried his face in his hands, bringing his knees up to his chest as he curled in on himself. Magna cooed at him as she settled to sit next to him, wrapping him up in her arms. Shigaraki scoffed. Typical. I wouldn't expect anything less from All Might. He was the one hero that Stain said was true. He has to have some sort of redeeming quality, the lizard man said. The blonde girl glared at him while hissing, "Shut up, spinner. The guy is obviously a deech if he was so mean to this cutie." "Kid, did you write this stuff?" the scarred man asked, still reading from the notebook. Izuku looked up and shyly nodded. "Yeah, that's one of my hero analysis books." "Is that your quirk? Analysis?" He shook his head. "No, I just really like heroes and studying them. Like I said, I wanted to be a hero and I thought if I studied heroes, I could learn to be like them." "These are actually good, kid. Like really good." "Let me see that." Shigaraki snapped, snatching away the notebook. He scanned the pages, his glare slowly morphing to confusion, then excitement. "Not half bad. You must be pretty smart if you were able to write these up. Do you have an intelligence quirk then? Come on, tell me what your quirk is. I'm curious now." Izuku ducked his head, avoiding Shigaraki's gaze. He felt Magna squeeze him ever so slightly tighter. "It's okay, hun. You can tell us your quirk. None of us will judge you for it." I don't have a quirk. I'm quirkless," Izuku said. He immediately closed his eyes and tensed in preparation for the attacks that he knew were coming. Instead, Magna just gave him a little squeeze while the scarred man made an impressed noise. "Wish I was that smart, especially at your age," he said. "When I was 13, I was out just trying to cause trouble." I'm 15. "Oh shit, you're tiny." "Dabi, you're not helping," Magna scolded. "Oh, you're almost the same age as me," the blonde girl said excitedly. "I'm 16 years old. Wait, I didn't tell you my name. I'm Himiko Toga." "What's your name?" Izuku hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should tell the group of villains his name, even if they were being surprisingly nice. Before he could make up his mind, Shigaraki flipped the notebook closed and looked at the cover, where Izuku had written his name. Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. At least that's what this thing says. Yeah, that's my name. I don't mean to be rude, but am I allowed to? Go. Like I said, I won't tell anyone I met you guys. For sure. No, we have to kill him, the masked man said, contradicting himself. Don't listen to twice, Magna said. He doesn't mean it. I'll make you a deal, Midoriya. I'll let you go, but I want to keep this notebook. And I want you to write down one more analysis for me. Do we have a deal? Shigaraki asked, holding out the notebook to the small boy. Izuku nodded vigorously. Yeah, sure. Whatever you want. Who should I write it on? Endeavor, Dabi chimed in slightly too quickly. If anyone else noticed, they didn't say anything. Within minutes, Izuku was handing the notebook back, 2 full pages written on Endeavor. I did an analysis on him a few years back. This is everything I wrote before, along with a few recent things I noticed. Is that enough? See, can I go home? Dabi stepped up behind Shigaraki, who failed to try to wave the other man off, and read the pages over Shigaraki's shoulder. He smiled, his skin pulling on the staples in his face as he reached out to ruffle Izuku's hair. Izuku flinched at first, thinking that he had somehow messed up and was going to be killed for it. When he realized the man was being fairly gentle with him, he froze and stared at the floor, his thoughts racing as he tried to process what was going on. That's perfect, kid. Toga, help him pick up his sheet. Kurogyri, think you can open up a warp gate to send him home? Kurogyri nodded. Yes. Where can I drop you at, young Midoriya? Can you tell me a general area so that I can see if I know any locations near there to open a warp gate to? Do you know the Shiba River Park in Mizudafu? Yes, I do. Toga scurried over with an armful of papers and books that she helped squeeze back into Izuku's backpack. Once it was zipped up, she helped him to stand on his shaky legs while Magna tutted over Izuku's dirty school uniform. A warp gate opened and Izuku was ushered through. As it closed behind him, leaving him in the dim park, the street lights just starting to flicker on, Yuko was left wondering quite a few things. Should he believe the League won't come for him eventually, since he was a liability now? Did he make the right choice, handing over all that information on Heroes? And why did he find that he didn't particularly care if what he did was wrong? In the end, he did it to survive. It wasn't like there was anyone out there that would care enough to save him. After all, he was just a quirkless Deku. He was alone in the world. The only person that was going to look out for him was himself. "I have a gift, Sensei," Shigaraki said, his cracked lips twisting into a smile as he held out a notebook. His sensei, the true leader of the League of Villains, pet his head, his eyeless face turned towards the young man. "A notebook, Tamura? Tell me, what is in the notebook?" "It's filled with detailed write-ups on plenty of heroes. When we went to release the Nomu into the city, an NPC fell through. Skinny kid, kinda short. Said he tried to kill himself. I'd hoped he had an interesting quirk to give you, especially after I saw his notebook, but he turned out to be quirkless. Some of the others seemed worried about him and wanting to help solidify their trust in me. I agreed to let the kid go on the condition that he write out one more analysis in the book and leave the thing with me. He gave us more information than I think he realizes." "Well done, Tamura. You were smart to use this opportunity to foster your subordinate's loyalty. But if the boy is as smart as you are implying, he may very well know how much information he has handed over. It's curious he was so willing to give it to you. He might be a resource to utilize at a later date. First, read me some of his analysis. I am curious about how thorough he was." Izuku's shoulder ached as he started his trek home, bruises already forming from being slammed against the side of a locker. The sleeve of his uniform jacket was torn, and there were specks of blood on the white button-up shirt he wore. He still clutched a blood-stained tissue in his hand from when he had mopped up his bloody nose. It had been weeks since Izuku's encounter with the League of Villains, and it was like nothing had changed. He went to school, got bullied, and then went home. He kept waiting for his mom to notice the missing notebook, or how quiet he was, or the fact that he hadn't come home until late the night he had tried to kill himself. Yet she never said anything, same as how she never said anything about the bruises, cuts, and burns that had covered his body for years, nor did she comment on his damaged school uniforms. She had simply taught him a few basic stitches so he could mend them. The blood on his clothes had been common enough for him growing up that he had long since learned how to get the stains out. A part of Izuku wondered why he was still so scared of his bullies. After all, he had a run-in with the League of Villains and they were a million times scarier than the kids at school. Yet, the League was also somehow kinder than his bullies. They hadn't hurt him. They hadn't cared about the fact he didn't have a quirk. They had even been impressed with his hero analysis. He'd been checking the news too, and none of the heroes from the notebook he gave them had been hurt, at least not badly. The only thing he had seen on any of the heroes was from when Mount Lady had tried to apprehend the League. Izuku had written that due to her being unable to be any other size between her largest or her normal size, meaning that the best way to counteract her was to lead her into a smaller space where she wouldn't be able to use her quirk. With her high ambitions and desire to reach the top, she would be mindful to minimize the destruction of public property so that her ratings wouldn't take a hit. When she had gone after the League, they had dodged into some back alleys. She wasn't able to follow them without deactivating her quirk, and they were far too dangerous to go after without a quirk. The League had managed to escape, avoiding her easily. Izuku kept walking, mulling this over, and not particularly paying attention to what was going on around him. "Deku! Hey, Deku!" someone called just as a hand came down on his injured shoulder, squeezing it painfully tight. Izuku yelped, trying to twist out of the bully's grip. The bully gave him a shove, sending him into the wall of a nearby building. "What are you mumbling about now, huh, Deku?" "And nothing. Can you please just let me go home? Please?" The bully laughed. Listen to you beg. You sound like you're about to cry. Hold still, I'll give you something to actually cry about." He pulled his fist back, preparing to punch Izuku square in the face when a shadow fell over them. Someone grabbed the boy's arm and yanked him away, freeing Izuku. The bully started to protest, but his words died in his throat when he saw who was looming over him. Can't believe they call me a villain when scum like you are walking around, Dobby drawled, tightening his grip on the boy's wrist, his skin slowly starting to heat. The bully looked panicked as he desperately tried to twist his arm away. At least I attack people who deserve it. What the hell did this kid ever do to you? He's just a quirkless loser we all mess with. It's not a big deal. Yeah. What's your quirk, tough guy? Got something real fancy and flashy? Gonna be a big strong hero someday? Come on, I'm curious, Dobby said with a sneer. The boy stared up at him, his eyes blown wide with fear. I can tell the exact components of foods by looking at it, along with the calories. I'm going to work as a dietitian at my mom's practice. Dobby scoffed. That's a lame FANG quirk. With enough research, anyone could do that. Now, lucky for you, I'm not a fan of killing kids, so I'll let you go for now. But if I see you causing trouble again. Dobby paused and raised his other hand, a small blue flame flickering to life. Well, let's just say I have no problem hurting kids. As soon as Dobby let go of the boy's arm, the bully took off running. Izuku was left behind, staring at the villain and trying to hide his shaking hands. Were you following me? Izuku asked quietly. Yeah, today was the first time though, so don't freak out. I wanted to ask you a question about your notebook. Then I saw that little sheep messing with you, so I figured I'd scare him off. You're welcome, by the way. Dobby looked Izuku over, pointedly looking at the blood stains and damaged clothes. This sheet happens a lot? It's not a big deal, said Izuku, looking away. You need to learn to stand up for yourself, kid. If you fight back, they'll leave you alone. Izuku's eyes went wide as he hurriedly shook his head. Oh, I can't do that. I tried that once and Kaken got really angry and he burned me really badly. If I fight back it makes it worse. And without a quirk to defend myself with I can't just dash. Wow, slow it down. Do you know how many heroes and villains fight without using a quirk? Plenty. What's a kid with a calorie quirk going to do against a knife? Jack sheet. You just need to learn to fight. But that's not why I'm here. Your notebook was labeled as volume. Do you really have 12 others? Izuku tentatively nodded. Nice. Let me know if you ever want to sell those. Especially if you have any more thoughts on Endeavor, I'll pay. And with that, the tall, scarred man slipped back into the alley beside them and disappeared into the shadows. After his run-in with Dobby, Izuku took to checking over his shoulder wherever he went. He wasn't particularly scared that Dobby would show up to hurt him, but he didn't love the idea of being followed without his knowledge. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that he noticed some movement, someone tailing him. He made a few turns, leading them to a more deserted area, before ducking onto a quiet side street. Once he was sure no one else was around, he cleared his throat. Dobby, is that you? Are you following me again? The slight scuff of shoes against brick caught Izuku's attention. He glanced up and saw the blonde girl, Toga, scrambling off the edge of a roof and onto a fire escape. From there, she clambered down to the ground. With a skip in her step, she approached Izuku. Her smile seemed sharp and looked dangerous, especially with her fangs flashing in the low light of the setting sun. How'd you know I was there, Izukuin? That caught Izuku off guard. Where did the nickname come from? Ever since Dobby talked to me the other day, I've been keeping an eye out. I thought you were him. Can I ask why you're following me? Izuku asked nervously. Dobby told me he saw you get bullied and some of us didn't like it. I fight without using a quirk, so I'm the best one to teach you. Wait, what? Here. Toga excitedly shoved the handle of a knife into his hand. You can keep this one. It's really sharp and will work super well. There's a park up the street that usually doesn't have too many people in it, so we can go there. By the way, I really like your shoes. Red is such a good color on you. At least 3 times a week for a month straight, Toga would find Izuku on his way home and work with him for hours on how to fight. After she realized how little he knew, she started him on basic self-defense and movements. From there, she started teaching him how to use the knife she gave him. Slowly, she became a normal part of his life and he found himself looking forward to working out with her. Sure, sometimes she slipped up and would give him a little cut, but she couldn't help it. It was in her quirk's nature for her to have an interest in blood. It was like if someone had a strength-enhancing quirk, they would naturally be prone to building muscle. Her desire to see and consume blood was just another part of her quirk. Izuku just had to be careful to quickly clean up his blood so that she didn't get too distracted by it. One day, when Toga showed up to train him, she had Magna with her. Immediately, Izuku got nervous. He had gotten used to Toga's presence, but anyone else from the league put him on edge, which he frankly thought was fair. "Hey there, kid. I didn't properly introduce myself before. I'm Big Sis Magna," the woman said, smiling at Izuku. "I heard Toga talking about your training and I wanted to come check on you." "I told her you were fine, but she didn't believe me," Toga pouted. "Your definition of fine is very different from everyone else's, Toga. Now, are you eating enough, Midoriya? You're working out a lot, so you really need to be eating more." Izuku stared up at her with his round, green eyes, feeling utterly confused. Was this villain worried about his health? I try to eat extra when I can. Mostly at school instead of at home. My mom would notice if I started to eat a bunch more and then she'd start asking questions and I don't want to worry her. Magna nodded. Has she said anything about you coming home covered in dirt? What about the bruises and cuts from working out? Or does she just think it's from the bullies? I do my own laundry so I don't think she notices my clothes, Izuku said, looking down at the ground and kicking at a rock. And she's so used to me having bruises that she probably just assumes they all come from the same place. Which makes sense, really. I don't blame her for thinking that. She stopped asking about them a long time ago. She helps me with the bad injuries, though. That had both Magna and Toga frowning. Izuku-kun, is your mom not nice to you? Toga asked defensively. My mom wasn't very nice to me, so I totally understand what it's like. Oh no, she's plenty nice. She's just really busy. She's a single mom and she has to work a lot to make ends meet. She worries a lot though, especially since I'm quirkless. I try to hide as much stuff as I can so she doesn't worry. And since she is at work so much, she taught me to do stuff by myself, like how to do a little bit of sewing. Now if my school uniforms get damaged, I can fix them. You shouldn't have to though. I know your mom is busy and doing her best, but she should have put her foot down about the bullying, Magna said. She looked rather upset, though it was hard to tell with the sunglasses. She tried once to stop the bullying but the school didn't listen to her. And I'm plenty old enough to take care of myself now. She's probably just giving me the chance to solve my own problems and learn how to stand on my own 2 feet, you know? Izuku said, his nearly becoming desperate, trying to brush off their concerns. Don't care, Magna said, crossing her arms. Next time your uniform is damaged, give it Toga. She'll bring it to me and I'll fix it. Also, I'm sending snacks with Toga from now on. You're going to eat them, got that? And I'll be coming with her sometimes to check on. Have I made myself clear? Izuku found that he was trembling, tears burning in his eyes. When the two villains noticed, they both looked slightly panicked. Before either could say anything, Izuku gave a broken sob and spoke. Why are you guys being so nice to me? I don't get it. I'm just a useless, quirkless Deku. The only person who has ever been nice to me was my mom, and that's because she has to. I don't get it. Within a heartbeat, Magna had him bundled up in her arms, giving the boy a tight hug. Listen, kid, we may be villains, but we're still human. For the most part, we still care about other people. Dabi is hit or miss on that and Shigaraki definitely doesn't, but the rest of us do have hearts. That means when I see a scrawny boy in dirty clothes covered in bruises and scars, I'm going to worry about him. So just let us help when we can, okay? We'll do what we can to help and we'll keep you out of the stuff we get into. Yeah, exactly. Toga said excitedly. Just avoid Shigi and you'll be fine. Izuku and Toga continued training together. She had even taken to bringing him to rooftops to learn some basic parkour. There were a few scares, where he nearly didn't make the jumps, but Toga was surprisingly fast and would always manage to grab his arm, keeping him from falling. Every time that she would pull him back onto the roof, they'd collapse in a heap, giggling and laughing together. The pair ducked and weaved through the streets, passing unseen. And slowly, as they grew closer as friends, Izuku's confidence slowly grew as well. On days where Toga didn't train him, Izuku would go out by himself. He'd travel the city, finding new ways to get from location to location. Eventually, he'd settle himself somewhere quiet to finish off any homework he didn't get done at school. Most of the time, he'd get the work done during class. It was easy work, there was nothing to challenge him. Izuku had started supplementing so he wouldn't go crazy from boredom. He kept up with his hero analysis, since it was what he was best at. He also started researching how to do some coding, which led him to reading up on hacking. Izuku knew better than to try hacking anything. Izuku figured he hadn't done anything illegal yet, besides maybe spending time with wanted criminals and some light trespassing while parkouring, and he wanted to keep it that way. After all, even if he had given up on his dream of becoming a hero, he didn't want to go to jail. That didn't mean he couldn't study the theory behind how to hack. He was positive that should the need arise, he would be able to hack a number of things fairly well. Izuku had perched himself on a roof to work on some homework and had turned on the Hero Watch station he typically listened to. He'd mostly tuned it out when something caught his attention. The fight has passed Shiba River Park and is heading towards a populated area. Mount Lady and Kamui Woods are trying to redirect the villain, but he seems to have slipped past them. What's this? All Might has appeared on the scene. Izuku's stomach did a flip. All Might? So close by? If the villain was running in the direction Izuku thought he was, then the fighting was getting dangerously close to where Izuku lived. Without thinking, Izuku threw all his things into his backpack and jammed his earbuds into his ear, pocketing his phone as he stood up. He took off running, jumping to the next rooftop and hurrying towards his apartment building. It appears the villain has a seismic quirk of some kind. He just rattled All Might. All Might is swooping in for an attack. He sent a burst of air at the villain. The villain has been thrown backwards into a building. Let's see if he gets back up. Izuku ran faster, desperately praying that his mom wasn't home. He hoped that she had gone out with friends, or stayed late at work, or anything as long as she wasn't home. The villain has activated his quirk. The building is taking heavy damage. Kamui Woods is attempting to stabilize the building while also trying to pull civilians to safety. Mount Lady is currently setting up a perimeter to keep everyone back. All Might and the villain are continuing their fight. None of their quirks are suited for stabilization or recovery. Where are the rescue heroes? Izuku whispered to himself as he ran. The building has collapsed. Kamui Woods has moved away from it and is attempting to aid Mount Lady in creating a perimeter. It looks like All Might has knocked out the villain. He's picked up the villain and is heading to the nearest police department. Kamui Woods and Mount Lady are holding the perimeter until search and rescue can arrive. Izuku found himself sliding down a fire escape and landing on a side street only a block from his building. His lungs felt like they were on fire as he kept running, making a mad dash for his building. When he finally turned the corner onto his street, it was like the air had been knocked from him. His knees shook and he thought he was going to puke. It was his building. It was destroyed. There was no more than a pile of rubble and smoke. Izuku fished his phone out of his pocket and dialed his mom's number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried calling her work. It took 2 tries, but the person to finally pick up said that Izuku's mom had gone home, stating that she was planning to have a quiet night in. Looking around, Izuku couldn't see his mom anywhere. Stifling a broken sob, he made to run again, this time towards the decimated remains of his building in a mad attempt to find his mom. As he went to take a step, a hand came down on his arm, tightly squeezing his bicep. With a harsh pull, Izuku was thrown backwards into the stranger's narrow chest. The grip on his arm was released only for a thin arm to wrap around him, holding him against their body. Izuku tried to struggle, but it didn't seem to do much good. He was forcibly yanked into an alley and thrown against the wall beside a dumpster. Let me go. I need to find my mom. Izuku sobbed, continuing his struggles. Shut it, genius boy, a raspy voice hissed. Finally getting his eyes to focus, Izuku saw that the man to grab him was none other than Shigaraki, the leader of the League of Villains. Shigaraki wore a black sweatshirt, the hood pulled up to shield his face. He was careful to keep his pinkies raised as he gripped Izuku's shoulders, steadying him. She's gone, Midoriya. She's gone. There's nothing you can do. She might still be alive, you don't know. What are you even doing here? I was in the area scoping out heroes. That doesn't matter right now. She is not alive. We both know that. It wasn't your fault. Hell, it isn't even that weak NPC villain's fault. The heroes are to blame. They drove him this direction. They threw him into your building. They were the ones who let the whole building crumble. There is nothing you can do, not with your current skill set. If you want to do something, you'll need to level up. Izuku frowned, rubbing at his eyes. Level up. As of right now, your options are either you go stay with your dad, wherever he is, or you go into foster care. But you have a third option if you're willing to take a chance. You can come with me. Join the league. I can't do that. Why not? You already spend most of your time with league members. We've been nicer to you than anyone else in your life. Shigaraki paused and let his eyes skim over Izuku, taking him in. I'm not saying I'd be sending you out to fight heroes. At least not right off the bat. Not until you were ready. I'm saying you come back with me now, you have a safe place to stay, and we help teach you, help you level up. What do you say, kid? Ready for people to actually give a shit about you? Izuku sniffled. I won't have to go fight? You guys would keep me safe. Yes. We'll take care of you. Protect you. We'll be better to you than anyone else ever will be. Think about it, Midoriya. If you were moved away, you'd never see Toga or Magna again. You'd be alone. Completely and truly alone. Who knows where you would end up, or who you'd end up living with. Slowly, Izuku found himself nodding along with Shigaraki's words. I don't know exactly where my dad is, and if no one can contact him, I'd end up in foster care. Things could end up really bad for me there, right? Since I'm quirkless? Shigaraki's lips twitched, though it was hard to tell if he was suppressing a frown or a smile. Exactly. Yeah, I'll go with you. At least for now, until I figure things out. You've returned, Tamura, All for One said, smiling at Shigaraki as the younger man entered the room. The plan worked, sensei. I dropped little hints to Dabi to get him to seek out the boy. Then he let slip to Toga, just as I thought he would. Toga took to Midoriya immediately and even got Magna to grow attached to him. Then all I had to do was give a low level villain some direction to attack in the area that Midoriya lived in. Told him which building, which floor, to crash into. He collapsed the whole thing though. It was perfect. And now we have Midoriya. It's only a matter of time before his stats are boosted enough that he can be of use. You did well, my boy. Keep cultivating these relationships. The stronger and more loyal your followers, the stronger you are. Class 1A were in their first class of the day when Bakugu's phone rang. Aizawa glanced up from the notes he was lecturing from to glare at the student. Phones are supposed to be on silent, Bakugu. You know this. It was on silent, Bakugu grumbled, yanking his phone out of his pocket. Only my mom's number is set up to ring. Bakuga looked at the screen and found he was right. It was his mother. After the incident at the summer camp, they agreed to have their phones set up so that even if their phones are on silent, if they called each other, it would ring. That way, if there was an emergency, they could reach each other no matter what. Sir, I need to take this, Bakuga said. Put it on speaker. I want to know what is so important that she is willing to interrupt our class. It was easier to just do as he was told rather than argue. In the end, Bakugu was getting what he wanted and that was all that mattered. He quickly swiped his finger across the screen to answer the call. Mom? What's the issue? He was met with muffled sobs. Katsuki, did you hear about the villain attack last night in our neighborhood? Everyone in the class froze, even Aizawa. Bakugu straightened in his seat. What? Are you guys okay? Your father and I are fine. Katsuki, it's the Midoriyas. The villain crashed into their building and used his quirk to completely destroy it. They found Inko's body, but they aren't sure if they have Izuku's. There were a few bodies so heavily injured that they can't identify who they are. They're gone. Katsuki, they're gone. Bakuga didn't move. All the blood drained from his face, leaving him as pale as paper. His red eyes stared straight down at the phone, unseeing and unblinking. Kirishima climbed out of his seat and came over to Bakugu's side. Mrs. Bakugu, he said. I think Bakugu is pretty shocked. I'm going to hang up now and take him to Recovery Girl or something. Kirishima? Why do you have his phone? He had to put his phone on speaker to be allowed to pick it up. I'm really sorry for your loss. Oh shit, I think he's starting to hyperventilate, so I've got to go. Take care of my boy, she said, almost panicked as Kirishima hung up. Aizawa had made his way over as well and was kneeling beside Bakugu. Bakugu, can you hear me? Aizawa asked, carefully putting his hand on the boy's shoulder. When Bakugu flinched, Aizawa let go. Bakugu, I'm sorry that I made you put the phone on speaker. I will not be doing it again. You're dismissed from class for the rest of the day. Kirishima is going to walk you to Recovery Girl's office. You will be staying there until she says you are allowed to leave. No, Bakugu croaked out. What? No, I need to go. I need to go over there. I have to find him. Bakugu struggled to get out of his seat but was quickly grabbed by Aizawa. There is nothing you can do, Bakugu. I never apologized. I need to find him and apologize. I promised myself I would. You have to let me go. Bakugu snarled, tears welling in his eyes. He tried to shove Aizawa off, only to weakly push at his shoulders. Kirishima wrapped Bakugu in his arms and let Bakugu bury his face into Kirishima's chest. Aizawa gave Kirishima a nod. I'll take him to Recovery Girl, Kirishima said, already guiding Bakugu towards the door. Stay with him until he calms down. We can share a room, Izuku-en. Toga excitedly said, dragging Izuku through the hideout, showing him around. He stumbled along behind her, trying not to giggle at her antics as they finally settled in the living room. Magna, Spinner, and Compress were all lounging and watching TV. We'll have to get you a bed or something, but there should be room. Oh, maybe we can get a bunk bed. That would be so fun. And sharing a room with me will be a lot better than sharing with Dabi or Twice or any of the others. Give the kid a chance to breathe, Toga, Magna scolded. You're going to need a villain name too. Unless you want to use your real name, like me, Toga continued. Izuku awkwardly rubbed at the back of his head. I don't know how much villain work I'll really be doing since I'm still not great at fighting. I've been getting better with my computer skills though, so maybe I can choose a hacker name. If I end up helping you guys with a mission or something, we can just stick with that name, I guess. Hacker name, villain name, not much of a difference, Spinner scoffed. Hush, Magna said, swatting at his leg. I think it's a good idea. What were you thinking, Midoriya? Well, I was thinking about using Deku. This friend I had as a kid called me that to call me useless and make fun of me for being quirkless, but I want to take it back, you know? Reclaim it. Toga squealed, clapping her hands together excitedly. It's so cute. I love it. Spinner leaned forward in his seat. All right then, show me what you can do with a computer? I'm curious. Izuku, newly coined as Deku, sat down next to Spinner and pulled his laptop from his backpack. With a few keystrokes, Deku had the computer booted up and had the Wi-Fi pinging through various satellites, hiding his actual location. Okay, I'm set up. What would you like me to hack? The CCTV cameras in Hosu City, Spinner said, the answer immediate. I want to see the hero killer, Stain, on his last night as a free man. Deku nodded. Yeah, I can do that. Hold on. It only took him a moment to find the footage, even though it was older. He pulled it up and set it to run. There was no sound, but they were able to see a teenager, probably near Deku's age, enter the alley as Stain made a move to kill a hero. The teenager's hero costume was similar to Ingenium's, making Deku wonder if the boy looked up to the retired hero. The pair talked for a moment before the teenager lunged at Stain. The boy's leg came around to kick at Stain's head, only for Stain to dodge and nick the boy with a blade. Stain quickly licked up the blood from the blade and the teenager went still. He collapsed to the ground, completely unable to move. Stain seemed to monologue before approaching the immobilized pro-hero, who Deku then realized was native, and stabbed the hero through the heart. The hero shuddered before falling limp, dead. Stain continued to monologue, circling the boy. The team yelled something that seemed to PSS Stain off. With a snarl, Stain lunged and slashed his blade at the boy's face, leaving a weeping gash from his forehead, across the bridge of his nose and down his cheek. The boy screamed in pain, though his body didn't flinch, since he was still paralyzed. As Stain raised his sword to drive it through the boy's chest, a blast of flames shot out from off-camera, catching Stain in the chest and sending him flying backwards. Another teen came running on screen. This one piqued Deku's interest. The new teen had bicolor hair. Half was red and half was white. His hero's suit was rather plain, at least compared to others. It was just a blue jumpsuit with some white detailing and a belt. The boy stood over the other teen, shielding him from Stain. His face was rather intense. There was almost a hidden anger behind his expression. He looked almost familiar. That's the Todoroki kid. Endeavor's son, Spinner hissed, eyes narrowing. That was when Deku realized where he had seen the other boy before, the sports festival. He and Kaken had fought each other. Kaken had beaten him, but hadn't seemed particularly happy about it. Back then, Todoroki had only used ice, though the commentator had said the boy had a half-hot, half-cold quirk. Deku had been curious back then what that had meant, and now he had his answer. Todoroki could also wield fire. Stain snarled something at Todoroki and made to lunge again, only to be struck with a blast of ice that sent him backwards again. The wounded boy on the ground was shouting again, though neither Todoroki nor Stain responded. Before Stain could get up again to attack, Todoroki formed a wall of ice that spanned the alley, splitting Stain away from them. As soon as the wall was up, Todoroki was trying to lift the other boy from the ground, quickly trying to make his exit. Just as he got to the entrance of the alley, Stain leapt to the top of the ice wall and threw a knife at the two teens. The other boy seemed to have regained mobility and swung his arm up, shielding Todoroki and allowing the knife to sink into his arm. He gave a scream, but it gave Todoroki a chance to turn around and send a blast of flames at Stain. It struck him in the chest and knocked him backwards off the wall of ice. The pair of boys hurried off camera, drops of blood leaving a trail behind them. Just as Stain managed to climb back to the top of the ice, a massive wave of fire ripped through the alley, completely melting the ice and burning Stain. Endeavor stepped into view, flames lighting up his arms. Another burst of flames shot up, frying the camera. Spinner and Deku were left looking at a blank screen. After a beat, Deku closed the laptop. "That's it, I think," Deku said, slipping his laptop back into his bag. "Children," Spinner whispered. Children defeated Stain. No, they didn't defeat him. They evaded him. They fought back just enough to escape. Deku paused, ping his head for a moment as his mind began to race. The situation would have been vastly different if Native hadn't been killed. With that two-toned hair boy, Todoroki, being the only one mobile, it would have been impossible for him to keep Stain back and get both of the others out of there. With Native dead and the only other person in the alley being the other student, Todoroki only had two choices: take on Stain alone or get the boy to safety. He made the right choice, in my opinion. There is no way Todoroki could have defeated Stain alone. If Stain got a hold of any of Todoroki's blood, then all of them would be dead. Spinner glared at him. "Are you taking that boy's side?" Deku's eyes went wide as he frantically shook his head. "No. I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm just, analyzing the fight and stuff." "Cut him some slack, Spinner. Not everyone is obsessed with Stain as you are," Magna said. "Though, I think if we gave him the chance, he'd be a fan. Stainy is amazing, Dekun. I can tell you all about him, okay?" Toga said excitedly, her eyes sparkling. "Oh, but thank you, Toga-kun." Deku quickly ducked, narrowly avoiding the knife that Toga had thrown at his head. Magna laughed from the sidelines, watching the two youngest members of the league spar. Toga stuck to her knives, while Deku had picked up a few other things. He still had some knives, since they were the first weapon that Toga had taught him, but he also had grown fond of his Eskrima sticks and his collapsible staff. They were less likely to cause serious damage or kill someone, which was his favorite thing about them. He may be with the League of Villains, but he still wasn't a fan of death. Dashing forward, he caught Toga around the middle and knocked her to the ground. She tried to stab at his sides, but he managed to block her swings and knock one of her knives away. Toga was laughing as she twisted her body, pushing off the ground and rolling Deku beneath her. He had to dodge again as she brought a knife down towards his face. She managed to nick his ear, bringing forth a bubble of deep, red blood. Her eyes were drawn to it, and for just a moment, she faltered. Just as Deku had planned. Within seconds, he had her pinned and, devoid of knives, ending the match. "You did it!" Toga shrieked excitedly. "You finally beat me." "It was bound to happen eventually, Toga," he said with a laugh. "Good job, kid," Magna shouted. She smiled proudly at him, making Deku feel warm. As she clapped, the sound echoed off the walls of the courtyard. Toga kept giggling as Deku helped her up from the ground. As soon as she was on her feet, she wrapped him in a hug, leaning up to lick at the cut on his ear. Deku, having become used to her doing this every time he was hurt, just gave a little chuckle. He ducked his head away, pulling himself from her arms. "Toga, let him go," Magna called, also laughing. "Yeah, let him go." The three jumped in surprise, turning to see Shigaraki and Dabi standing on the edge of the courtyard, watching them. Both looked rather unimpressed. Especially Dabi, who was fiddling with a cigarette before popping it into his mouth, the end glowing slightly blue, having been lit with his quirk. "We were just practicing," Toga said. "Deku is getting really good. I didn't let him join us for his fighting skills. I brought him on for his brain," Shigaraki said, his voice rasping. Dabi snorted. "Yeah, so how about you stop scrambling it?" Toga pouted but didn't respond. She just tightened her grip on Deku. "We have a meeting, so let's go," Shigaraki said, turning and walking out of the courtyard. "With who?" Magna called after. "Just move it. Deku, you're coming too." Deku perked up at that. He had only been brought out a few times for meetings, usually to analyze possible recruits or allies. Occasionally he was brought along for intimidation. Not because he was big and scary, but because he could spout off things about people's quirks without even pausing to take a breath. There had been some whispers starting in the underground about the small and mysterious villain with an analysis quirk, which only made Deku laugh. Within the hour, they were all huddled in an abandoned warehouse. They each found a place to hunker down, most of them distancing themselves from one another. Plenty of members of the League were friends, and they managed to get along when it counted, but they hardly called themselves close. Toga, Deku, and Magna considered each other good friends, and Toga was fairly close with Twice. She also had a bond with Dabi, since they joined that league at the same time. Mostly, Dabi just kept an eye on Toga occasionally, and Toga would help him with his staples when they got messed up. Spinner and Shigaraki seemed to get along, since the pair played video games together. And then Kurogiri acted like dad to them all, making sure they ate and slept on schedule. Mr. Compress and Magna also got along well. So well in fact that Toga was convinced that Compress had a crush on Magna. Anytime Deku and Toga brought it up to her, she brushed them off with a slight smile. Deku and Toga had climbed up on some old wooden crates and were lounging together. Toga had her legs dangling over the edge of the crate, kicking her feet happily. Deku had his legs drawn up and he was curled in on himself, his years of being bullied having trained him not to draw attention to himself, even if he did have a reputation by now that kept people from messing with him. He fiddled with his mask, trying to get it to sit comfortably on his face. He and Toga had designed his villain costume together for when he was dragged along to meetings. When he wasn't going to meetings to creep people out, he stayed in the base doing work behind the scenes. He'd hacked a few things for them and wrote out some more hero analysis too. He had also written up analysis for each of the league members to help them better develop their skills. It had especially helped Toga, who had never been told before that her interest in blood was natural for her quirk type. All her life, she had heard that her love for blood, both the taste and look, was evil. That she herself was evil for loving it. Deku sat down and explained how it was a natural side effect of her quirk, something that anyone with a blood quirk experienced to varying degrees, including Stain and Vlad King. He assured her that there was nothing wrong with her and that he would never judge her for her interest. Deku even went as far as to offer to let her have tastes of his blood whenever she really needed some. Her confidence skyrocketed and she was far less nervous about talking to new recruits. She relied less on her overly loud and crazed mask that she put on to keep people at arm's length. Toga even let Deku and Magna see her more vulnerable side. That's not to say she wasn't still unbalanced. She was still Toga, after all. It was just a part of who she was. While designing Deku's villain costume, they took into account that people were going to assume he had a quirk. That was fine with them. They'd never guess the truth. Especially not when they used support items to make it seem like he had a quirk. First, they designed some steel-lined boots for him. The soles and toes were steel, meaning when he kicked, it would cause more damage. Toga had wanted to add spikes, but Deku managed to talk her out of it. He had agreed to them being red though. Since he was quirkless, he had the extra toe joint, which made it hard to squeeze his feet into normal shoes. Most quirkless people had to buy special shoes, and the ones that he always got came from a company that made the shoes bright red as a part of their brand. Deku hadn't liked the color at first, but the brand was affordable while still being comfortable, so he wore them. Eventually, he had grown to like the color. Making shoes for Deku would have been troublesome, so it was easier to have existing ones modified to fit his needs. He had gotten his hands on the ones he wanted and made the modifications himself. They also designed matching fingerless gloves that had steel built into the knuckles. The rest of his clothes were black, which allowed him to blend into the background much easier. He had military-style cargo pants that were a bit baggy that he kept tucked into the boots. The pockets were large, so he was able to keep knives, smoke bombs, and lockpicks. His collapsible staff hung from his belt along with a canister of mace. He wore a loose black hoodie that hid the lean muscle he had developed. The hoodie was made out of reinforced material that, while it wouldn't hold up to everything, was slash-proof. If Toga tried to lovingly cut him, the knife would just graze right off. Underneath the hoodie, he would wear whatever t-shirt he could get his hands on, not caring too much about it. Deku always kept the hood up when he wore the jacket, careful to hide his distinctive green hair and to cast a shadow over his face. The mask he and Toga had designed was specially made to not only filter out harmful gases, smoke, and poisons, but also change his voice. Dabi had told them that no one was going to take him seriously with his young, high voice, so they made the mask so it'd deepen his voice and warp it slightly, making him sound almost robotic and otherworldly. Beneath the loose hoodie and pants, Deku had elbow and knee pads for some extra protection, and he wore a pair of goggles loosely around his neck. At his wrists, he had some specially made forearm guards hidden beneath his sleeves. One guard was able to send bursts of flame using a flammable gas and a small igniter, while the other shot out various types of acid. Some of the acids were for harming people, and some were for burning through inanimate objects. In that same brace were two types of gases as well, one to knock people out and one to induce hallucinations. Lastly, he had his Eskrima sticks in a holster strapped to his back. He kept them within easy reach, since he favored them out of all his weapons. They were made out of black carbon fiber, same as the rest of his weapons. They also were equipped to electrocute people if Deku pressed a small button on the handles. Depending on the settling, it would be enough to mildly shock them, or completely knock them out. The gear would have cost the League a pretty penny if it hadn't been for Deku offering his services to Jiren in exchange. He'd compiled a list of possible customers and subcontractors for Jiren to explore, along with details about their quirks. A truly invaluable bit of information. Jiren had appreciated it so much that he had even thrown in some extra cartridges for the forearm bracers for free. It was an understated costume, just how Deku liked it. He could blend into the background of the meetings until he was needed. This time, he wasn't sure why Shigaraki had him come. It seemed like any normal League meeting, which they could have just done back at the base instead of going to a weird old warehouse. That is, until Twice arrived with another man. The new man would be rather plain-looking with his pale skin and brown hair, if it wasn't for his clothes. He wore a plain black dress shirt that he had tucked into black dress pants. He paired the black outfit with white accessories, a white tie, white gloves, and white sneakers. The only pieces of color in his entire outfit were his jacket and his mask. The jacket was an army green color with a thick, furry purple collar that arched over his shoulders and around the back of his neck. The mask was unlike anything Deku had ever seen. It was based on an old plague doctor mask, giving the man a bird-like appearance. It had been colored a shade of rust red, with gold embellishments. Deku recognized the man right away. "You brought us a big fish, Twice," Shigaraki said, his eyes narrowing behind the hand he wore on his face. Magna frowned. What? Is this guy famous or something? He's a Yakuza. This is the young head of the Shai Hasaikai. Kai Chisaki, Deku said, his voice filtering through his mask. It's overhaul to you, the Yakuza head snapped, glaring. Before, Deku would have shrunk away in fear. But now, with his newfound confidence, he lazily batted his eyes at Overhaul. He waited until the man looked away to press himself into Toga's side, grounding her and himself while also making them a smaller target if things were to go wrong. Toga glared at Overhaul as she fiddled with a knife, making an obvious threat. The banter continued, Shigaraki and Overhaul exchanging verbal blows until Overhaul said something that made the entire group tense up. All Might hardly patrols anymore, and I haven't seen the League do anything impressive recently. There's no longer a king of the light. Or the dark. An open vacancy, if you will. Shigaraki's eyes narrowed even further. Magna tightened her grip on her magnet while Compress straightened in his seat. Toga shifted in her seat, like she was preparing for a fight. Deku balled his hand in the back of her sweater, pulling her backwards. He wasn't sure what was going to happen here, but he knew it wasn't going to be anything good. There was no way he would let Toga get involved. You seem to be mistaken, you Yakuza thug, Shigaraki sneered. Sensei is still powerful. And should he ever fall, I will be the next to rule. Do you honestly think you are the one for the job? I mean, you lost key players like Muscular, Moonfish, even Stain, to children. The Yakuza is thriving, especially with All Might focusing on teaching at UA. I have plans, big ones at that. All I need is the League of Villains name to earn me the trust of buyers, and I have everything we need to take over. So, Overhaul paused and raised his arms to either side of him in a welcoming gesture. Are you ready to join me? Dabi huffed. You're trying to get us to join you? You stupid or something? I'm asking you to let me lead you to greatness. It's not like you will be able to do it on your own. Not with such unevolved individuals in your ranks, Overhaul said. His eyes flickered over each of them as he spoke, but his eyes happened to scan over Deku and Toga while he said, unevolved. Deku's stomach twisted, suddenly flashing through memories of his classmates and teachers talking about how quirked people were more evolved or superior to quirkless. Cruel words streamed through his mind as he felt his body tense. Beside him, Toga hissed under her breath, her fangs bared. Deku tightened his grip on her sweater and pulled her into his side even more firmly. Magna, who was sitting on a crate below them, snarled at Overhaul. Deku immediately realized that she thought Overhaul was referring to him and how he was quirkless, even though there was no way for Overhaul to know that. Before he could say anything, Magna was in motion. Who the F are you calling unevolved? She snarled, lunging at Overhaul with her magnet raised to strike him. Overhaul raised one hand, glove gone, and dragged a finger down her arm. Magna's eyes went wide, her skin bubbling. In less than a second, Magna's entire upper half exploded outwards, sending blood flying. Deku's breath caught in his throat as something warm hit his face. With a shaking hand, he touched the splatter on his forehead, wiping it away. Toga had completely frozen, her body stiff and her face blank. For once, Toga didn't look excited at the sight of blood. With a shout, Mr. Compress lunged across the room towards Overhaul, hand raised. Compress! No! Shigaraki yelled, running forward at the same time. Overhaul swiped at Compress' arm, and within a blink of an eye, the arm was gone. Compress collapsed, blood spilling across the floor. Shigaraki reached a hand out, all 5 fingers splayed and ready to decay the other man. Before his hand could touch Overhaul, other members of the Yakuza, who seemed to have followed Overhaul to the warehouse, burst into the building. Overhaul pulled one of them in front of his body, allowing Shigaraki to touch and decay the underling, leaving Overhaul unharmed. What a mess, Overhaul said, pulling his glove back on. I will leave you for now, Shigaraki. We've each lost a man, leaving us even. I do seem to owe you an arm though. Here's my card. Call me when you're ready to talk. With that, Overhaul threw his card down, narrowly missing a pool of blood, and walked out of the building, his followers in tow. The room fell silent as the Yakuza left. Slowly, Toga climbed off the crate and approached Magna's magnet, staring at the blood with a dark expression. Deku scrambled after her, his hand reaching out to take hers. When she felt his skin against hers, she was broken from her trance and she turned to look at him. Frowning, she dragged her edge of her sleeve across his face and his mask, wiping away the blood. "I don't think I like you in red anymore," Toga said, her voice thick. Deku wiped her face clean too, tears threatening to spill over his cheeks. He didn't try to speak, his throat too tight to form words. "It's my fault," Twice stuttered. "I shouldn't have brought him here." "No. You shouldn't have, Dobby," snapped. He walked past the grief-stricken man to crouch next to Compress. A blue flame lit on his hand and he pressed it to the stub of Compress' arm. The smell of burning flesh filled the room, making Toga wrinkle her nose. Deku was lucky in that the scent was filtered out through his mask, but the sight of Dobby cauterizing the wound was enough to make his stomach rebel. He had to fight the urge to throw up. This was wrong. All wrong. How'd he get the jump on us? Shigaraki growled as he pulled the hand from his face. "Deku, Toga, I want you two to carry Compress. We need to take him to the doctor. I'll call Kurogyri to open a warp gate. Twice, you and Dobby are in charge of taking care of Magna's body. Try to get this place cleaned up too. Don't need to leave evidence that we were here for the heroes to find." "What are we supposed to do with her body?" Shigaraki fixed Twice with a harsh glare. "Dobby has a fire quirk. Figure it out." Deku hurried over to Mr. Compress and lifted him off the ground. With how much he'd been working out, it was easy for him to pull Compress across his shoulders into a fireman's carry. Toga picked up Magna's magnet, cradling it as one would hold a baby. A swirling purple warp gate opened and the group walked through, much more somber than they typically would be. Deku and Toga were settled into one chair together in the corner of the laboratory. It was a tight squeeze, but the pair were both so small and thin that they managed to wedge themselves in. The Nomu floating in their tanks lined the rooms, their wide eyes unseeing as they stared out. Deku kept glancing over at the nearest one, feeling almost as if he was being watched. Dr. Ujiko was flitting around the operation table that he'd set up in the center of the room. Compress was laid out on it, stripped from the waist up and devoid of his mask and hat. The charred skin of his shoulders slowly being cut away, leaving freshly opened wounds behind. The new robotic arm would be grafted onto the newly exposed nerves, allowing Compress to have full range of motion. "Deku, my boy, go collect the parts one need for the arm. You know where they are, correct?" Deku nodded at the doctor and hurried over to the workstation laden with various pieces of machinery. It took a few moments to find all the pieces he needed, but eventually he found everything. He stood by the doctor and started to piece together the arm, preparing it to be attached. "Very good, Deku. I always knew you would grow up to be a clever one, even when you were little," Ujiko said, referencing when he used to pose as Dr. Tsubasa and had diagnosed Deku as quirkless. "You understood everything I was telling you at just 5 years old. Understood it all faster than your mother did. Like I said, a clever one you are." "Is he going to be okay?" Deku asked, nodding his head towards Mr. Compress. "He should be fine. Once I have the arm attached, I will put him on N4 to get his fluids up and to give him some. But he'll be right as rain in no time." Toga sniffed at the air before tentatively climbing from her seat. "I think I can smell something weird. An infection maybe. You're going to need to give him antibiotics," she said, nodding towards Compress. "Oh yes, that doesn't surprise me. The warehouse you were all in was hardly clean and neither is my lab. This is a place for experimentation, not surgery. You would all do well to remember that." "Not exactly our fault this happened," Deku said, leveling Ujiko with a glare. "It's that a-hole Overhaul's fault." "Oh, what is this?" Ujiko laughed. "Curse words from young Midoriya? I never thought I would see the day. I don't go by that name anymore and you know it. Tell me, did you pick up that language from Toga?" "No, she hardly seems the one to curse that often." "Was it from Dobby then? Perhaps it was from that little friend of yours. What was his name?" "Bakugu." Deku didn't respond, but from the way he forcefully fitted together some pieces for the arm, it was obvious that Ujiko had struck a nerve. "Young Bakugu goes to UA now, doesn't he?" Quite a prestigious school. I am sure the teachers there love his quirk, just as they did at your middle school. When Ujiko saw the slight confusion on Deku's face, he smiled. Did you not think I kept an eye on him? I kept an eye on all my past patients. The interesting ones, that is. The ones with flashy, useful quirks. Or ones like you with no quirks. I was always curious about what would happen if we were to give you a quirk, Deku. I discussed with Shigaraki and our master about using quirkless patients, and there was some interest there. Have you ever considered Dash? Deku cut him off with an ominous growl, his head hung low but his eyes glaring upwards, making direct contact with Ujiko's. Touch him or me with any of your experiments, and you will regret it. Protective of Bakugo, are we? No. I'd just rather not see his ugly but face around here. Shouldn't you be focusing on compress? Think long and hard before deciding whether you will be taking on a work study, Aizawa said, eyeing each of his students carefully to gauge their interest. Many of them looked excited, nearly bouncing in their seats. Unsurprisingly, Bakugo looked downright bored. His eyes were dark, the bags under his eyes more pronounced than Aizawa would have liked to see. Ever since the call Bakugo had received during class, the boy had been nearly emotionless. Aizawa had forced the boy to start having sessions with Hound Dog to help with whatever depression the boy was going through, but it hadn't seemed to help much yet. It had only been a couple months, but Aizawa had been hoping for some sort of improvement by now. The only times Bakugo seemed to have any sort of reaction were when he got aggressive during sparring or when Kirishima managed to pry a rare smile from the other boy. If you have any questions, speak to me after class. You're all dismissed for lunch. The majority of the kids scrambled up, gathering their things in a hurry. Bakugo was slow, as had become normal, and Kirishima hovered over him, talking animatedly. One student caught Aizawa's attention though, Shinso. Shinso typically stuck close to Todoroki, the two having formed some sort of odd bond as two of the quietest, possibly shyest in the class. The two seemed to eat lunch and work well with Ida and Uraraka, but for the most part they kept to themselves. Today though, Shinso waved Todoroki on ahead. As the last of the students filed out, Aizawa and Shinso were left alone. Is there something I can help you with? You vouched for me and got me into the heroics program. That caught Aizawa by surprise. It was nearly enough to even get a reaction out of him. He didn't think that the young boy had known about that. After all, when he and Nizu struck their bargain a few years back to allow him to choose one student for heroics that had failed the physical entrance exam. The two heroes had agreed that the exam, while required by the commission, was biased against mental quirks. There was, of course, the sports festival route, which was how Aizawa got into the hero program. But in Aizawa's opinion, that was just adding more hurdles for a student that already had the odds stacked against them. So he made a deal. If Aizawa could choose one student to be brought into his class, he'd stop expelling his entire class on the first day. That didn't stop him from expelling classes later in the school year, but it kept the students there for longer than a day. I don't know what you're talking about, Aizawa said, keeping a stern look on his face. Liar. Shinso gave a wry smile. I want to be an underground hero, remember? That means doing research on anything and everything I think can help me as a hero. You taught us that early on. I did some digging in school records. Every year, there is one student in your class who is awarded special stealth or creative quirk use points in the entrance exam. It is always just enough to get them into the hero course. Those points didn't exist until you started teaching here. And the students they are awarded to are always ones who don't have flashy quirks. I know it's you. What does it matter? Train me. I already do. Outside of class. I want to do my work study with you. That was even more startling than Shinso figuring out the truth. You want to work for me? Why? Shinsu's smile grew. It's only logical for me to want to work under a successful underground hero. So, what's your answer? Aizawa sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. If I say no, you're not going to drop it, are you? Look at that, we already know each other so well. I'm going to regret this. Fuck it. You can do your work study with me. I won't take you on every mission, since some are more extreme than someone your age needs to deal with, but I can take you on patrols and I'll bring you on the missions that I can. Made myself clear? Crystal clear, sir. Now, when do I start? So you're serious? This isn't a joke? You actually want us to work with the Yakuza? Dabi said with a sneer, leveling lazy blue eyes on Shigaraki. The room was nearly bare, with only a few pieces of broken-down furniture scattered around the room. Dabi had dropped onto the empty bed frame as soon as he walked in, leaving Spinner and Twice to take the ratty old couch. Toga and Deku perched themselves on the window ledge, their feet dangling. Kurogiri was out working on something else, and Compress was still recovering. They had all listened as Shigaraki had debated with Toga and Twice, the rest of them carefully watching to make sure nothing escalated into a fight. Just below the window was Magna's magnet. Toga and Deku had been carrying it with them, feeling particularly attached to it ever since Big Sis Mag had been killed. Shigaraki gave Dabi a deadly grin. For the time being, up until they no longer serve their purpose. Yeah? What purpose is that? They are hiding something, Shigaraki said, leaning against one of the nearby walls. They are hiding how they are making those temporary quirk erasing bullets and how they plan to make the permanent ones. I want answers. That's why I'm sending Toga and Deku to work with them. That caught everyone's attention. Even Dabi froze, one brow pet up in question. You want to send the quirkless kid and the psychopath into the Yakuza den? Spinner asked. It makes the most sense. They wanted Kurogiri or Dabi, but I refused. With Deku, there's no chance of them erasing his quirk. And between Toga's spy skills and Deku's brain, they'll be able to figure out what the hell the Yakuza is hiding. And then, once we have our answers, we get our revenge. Toga leaned into Deku's side, glaring slightly at Shigaraki. What are we supposed to tell them about Deku-kun's quirk? They'll ask. Figure it out. They're expecting you both in the morning. Try not to PSS them off right away. With that, Shigaraki left. The others trickled out after, either going back to the hideout or going off to wherever they stayed when they weren't with the League. Spinner scooped up Magnet, taking it with him so that the two teens wouldn't have to carry it with them when they went to see the Yakuza. Toga and Deku were left behind, leaning against each other and absorbing the news. I don't like this, Toga whispered. Me either. I don't think Shigaraki is thinking far enough ahead. What do you mean? I mean, what if things go sideways? The Yakuza would have information on you and me. If they get arrested, they could tell the heroes about us. Toga nodded along with his words. That wouldn't be too big of a deal for me, since the heroes already know my name and have a little bit of an idea about my quirk. I'm more worried about you. If they find out who you are, it could be bad. I'll just have to keep my mask on around the Yakuza and lie to them about having a quirk. You'll be good to keep up the lie, right? Toga snorted before flashing her fangs in an impish smile. Of course I can. Who do you think I am? Right, I forgot I was speaking to a master of espionage, Deku said with a slight laugh, bumping his shoulder against hers. Toga let slip a high giggle as she ducked her head. Are you going to be okay with this though? I mean with seeing Overhaul again. She shrugged, furrowing her brows. I should be okay. It's just been hard lately, you know? I'm not getting enough blood in my diet, human or animal, and it's making me fuzzy. I'm scared I'll say something mean to Overhaul and get us in trouble. I really don't want Shiggy mad at us. I'll cover for you if we get in trouble. Don't do that. Shiggy is already crabby and he might be really mean to you. You heard what the doctor was saying. Shiggy and his sensei and the doctor have talked before about using quirkless people in their experiments. I don't want Shiggy to use you for it. Deku gave her a small smile. I've dealt with bullies before. Shigaraki isn't much different. I don't like that you think that, Toga said with a pout. The point of you coming and joining us was so you'd be happy and safe. I'm happy when I'm with you. I mean, you are my first real friend since I was little. You're my best friend, really. As long as you're here, I'll put up with Shigaraki and his tantrums. With a tiny squeal, Toga hugged Deku tightly. You're my best friend too, Deku-kun. I'll make sure Shiggy doesn't do anything to you, okay? I'll be extra careful, I promise. And if Shiggy tries anything, I'll cut him. Not in a good way either. I'll make him regret ever hurting you. I'd do it to anyone that tried to take you from me, got it? Thanks, Toga, Deku said, hugging her back. As they let go, he stepped down off the windowsill. Come on. Let's go find something to eat. Maybe we can find some raw meat or pig's blood or something to help you feel better. Then we can find somewhere to sleep for the night. We don't want to be tired when we show up to woo the Yakuza tomorrow. Got to make a good impression. Toga nodded and jumped down from the windowsill, and the pair slipped out into the dusk, no one batting an eye at a pair of teens giggling and joking around, just being children. So these quirk-erasing bullets? Shinso started, looking over the file that Aizawa had casually slipped him at the start of their meeting. They basically do what your quirk does? Just temporarily take away people's quirks. Correct. I've been helping with looking into the distribution of these bullets. I don't particularly want to bring you on this case, but we need all the help we can get, especially yours. If we manage to get hold of anyone involved in the creation or distribution of these bullets, we would need you to help with interrogations. Your quirk would work well for that. As long as I don't get hit with one of those bullets. Don't get shot and we won't have any problems. Shinso snorted at that, closing the file. Fair enough. And no leads yet? Only thing we have is a possible Yakuza connection, but we are still unsure. I've been working with Naitai's agency and I heard he is bringing in Fatgum's agency as well. I'm planning a stakeout in a couple of nights and I want you to come. Think you can handle going to class the next day? Shinso shrugged. I barely sleep as it is, so it shouldn't be an issue. Good. And I don't need to remind you that you can't tell anyone about this, right? I'm not an idiot. Keep telling yourself that, kid. Shinso leaned back in his seat and ran a hand through his unruly hair. What other cases are you working on? Anything you think I can help with? I'm not working on much else, Aizawa said with a frown. I limit myself to about one case at a time. When I have the time, I patrol and deal with smaller crime at night. Only other active case I have open is the League of Villains, but basically every hero is working that. Everyone is keeping their eyes and ears open. Shinso found himself shivering slightly thinking about the LOV. He'd faced them twice now, same as the rest of his class. The first time was back at the USJ, when he barely had any training or skills. He had his quirk, but he hadn't had the hand-to-hand combat that he had now, which had left him mostly useless. Shinso had been teleported away to the shipwreck zone, along with Tsu and Mineta. He had managed to brainwash one of the villains into attacking a few of the other villains, but as soon as the brainwashed villain got injured, it snapped him out of it. Tsu had then grabbed both him and Mineta and jumped to shore, giving them a chance to run back to the main square. The remaining villains from the shipwreck zone had tried to follow, but were caught up in Mineta's hairball things, the shorter teen throwing them as he ran. After that event, Mineta had transferred schools, saying he didn't trust UA anymore. And then, there was the summer camp incident. Shinso had had his one-on-one training with Aizawa by then, meaning he could take care of himself. Shigaraki had put out a hit on both him and Bakugu, having seen the two of them at the USJ and the sports festival. He'd thought that the two of them would make good villains and instructed the attacking villains to kidnap them both. He had been deep in the forest with Todoroki when he got word the villains were after him. The pair immediately began trying to get back when they ran into Tokoyami and Bakugu. Moonfish, a particularly bloodthirsty villain, was chasing them, trying to catch Bakugu. The stress of it all had triggered Dark Shadow to go into a rage, so Bakugu was not only trying to keep Moonfish back, but also try to light off an explosion bright enough to tame Dark Shadow. Todoroki jumped in quickly, lighting a fire on his arm and forcing Dark Shadow to retreat into Tokoyami. Shinso managed to get Moonfish to reply to him and put the villain under his brainwashing, telling him to sit down and not move. From there, the four boys hurried back to the campsite and managed to keep themselves from being captured. As soon as they entered the classroom where their other classmates were hiding, Vlad King guarding them all, Kirishima burst into tears and hugged Bakugu, earning himself a growl. Todoroki had refused to leave Shinsu's side, boldly stating that if a villain managed to get in, he would set them on fire. The rest of the students tried to dissuade him, saying that he would end up burning Shinso as well if he wasn't careful. I can protect myself, you know, Shinso had grumbled. Todoroki frowned. I know that. But you don't have your capture scarf and the other villains might not be as dumb as Moonfish, so they might not respond to you. That means you don't have any sort of ranged attack. With me here, we can be a team. I can be the long-distance fighter and you can be the close-quarters one. Shinsu's heart stuttered, realizing that Todoroki hadn't been looking down on him when trying to protect him. He'd just been trying to be a good friend. He gave Todoroki a small smile. Well, I guess I'd rather get lit on fire by you than get kidnapped. Stop encouraging him. Bakugo had snarled. Sitting in the classroom, thinking of the LOV while Aizawa rifled through his things to find the file on the LOV, Shinso hoped that he wouldn't have to see those particular villains anytime soon. The League has been laying low recently, but there has been word that they are trying to recruit fresh blood. So far, they haven't made much progress, but I have heard the name Deku thrown around a bit, so I am assuming that he is a new League member. Shinso pet his head. Deku? What kind of name is that? No clue. And no one has been able to get a read on his quirk, and we still haven't got a description of him. Only thing we've been able to get out of the criminals who will talk about him is that Deku is creepy and not to be messed with. Not sure what he's done to put them all on edge, but if you see him, just turn and run the other way, got it? Aizawa said, raising a brow and fixing Shinso with a stern look. When the teen nodded, Aizawa continued. Good. And don't tell your classmates about him either. At least not yet. We still aren't positive he is an actual League member and we have no idea what his quirk is. Until we have some solid information, we aren't telling your classmates anything. It would just make them more stressed than they already are. But it's okay to stress me out? Shinso joked. I trust your mental capacities to not let the stress get to you. You really do like me. Don't push it, brat. The Yakuza base was big. Really big. Deku found himself sticking close to Toga's side as the pair walked up to the front door. There were a set of guards at the door, watching the two approach. As they got closer, Deku could see that the guards were eyeing them carefully, searching them for weapons. Not that they would see any. They were too good at hiding them. Toga skipped up to the guards, smiling. Hi. We're here to see the boss man. Is he here? You're the people from the League of Villains? The first guard asked. You can't be serious. You're both kids. We've done more than you ever could, so how about you let us in before someone sees us, yeah? Deku snapped, his voice sounding odd as it passed through the voice modulator of his mask. Some of us here are pretty damn recognizable and it sure ain't you. The second guard snorted. He's got you there. All right, I'll show you the way. Follow me. As they walked through the halls, the guard's eyes kept flicking back to them. Finally he spoke. How old are you guys? 106, Deku said, deadpan. The guard frowned, clearly trying to tell if he was serious or not. Toga giggled but didn't offer up any further information. Not to be rude, kids, but are you sure about this? We're the Yakuza, you know? This is going to be dangerous. The guard paused, sighing. I just don't want to see any more kids tied up in this. Any more? Toga said, ping her head. Deku frowned behind his mask. Are there kids in the Yakuza? Not typically. Not in the old days, at least, the guard said, his tone dark. He said nothing more as he led them to a door and knocked at it. From inside, they heard movement and then the door opened, revealing one of Overhaul's close subordinates, a group that called themselves the 8 Bullets. His beaked mask was worn proudly, the leather material almost gleaming. Deku recognized him immediately and he hoped that Toga did too, considering he had spent a good portion of the night teaching her everything he knew about Overhaul's inner circle and their quirks. He had done all the research, back when he first started hearing about the quirk drags, both enhancing and erasing, that had come on the market. Deku wasn't about to let all that hard work of digging through shady websites and chat forums go to waste. The man before them was Shin Nemoto, quirk, confession. He was the one that they had to be careful with. Deku had quizzed Toga all night on how they could work around his quirk. You're late, he snapped, glaring at the teens. We were told to be here in the morning. It's morning, Deku snapped. Toga glared back at the man. If you wanted us here at a certain time, you should have given us one. It's 10 a.m. That's late in the morning. I would think that the League of Villains would be more prompt and eager to work than this. Not with this one sleep schedule, Toga said with a snort, elbowing Deku. He's up all night and then crashes when the sun comes up. You're lucky to see him before noon. None of the good stuff happens in the mornings. If I want to find anything decent online, I have to do it at night, Deku huffed, playing along with her shenanigans. He knew well enough that it was all a show she was putting on to irritate the Yakuza. Nemoto huffed before opening the door wider and letting them enter. The guard watched as the two teens walked into the room, his expression conflicted, as though he had just allowed children to walk into a lion's den. In a way, he almost had. Deku scanned the room quickly, eyeing each person and cataloging them with their quirks. He saw the majority of the 8 bullets, along with the leads of the shy Hisaikai. Overhaul sat on the couch. His quirk was obvious to both Deku and Toga, who had seen it in action. Then there was chronostasis, the aid to the organization. His quirk was a dangerous one. You just had to be hit by his clock hand-like hair, and you'd be slowed down. Depending on which clock hand you were hit with would determine how slow you'd be. Then there was Mimic, the director. His quirk was called Mimicry, which let him merge his body with an object and control it. It was a useful quirk, though the man's temper got the better of him more often than not, making him less of a threat than the others. Deep down, Deku knew if they could get through this next bit, he and Toga would be just fine. They just had to trick Nemoto's quirk. Deku carefully kept his expression as neutral and non-threatening as possible as he came further into the room and dropped into the seat opposite Overhaul. Toga stayed standing, hovering at his shoulder. "Glad to meet again on more pleasant terms, Overhaul," he said. "Let's try to get to know each other. I am Deku, and with my analysis, I can get a read on people's strengths, weaknesses, quirks, and so on. I need to be able to watch the person, either face-to-face or over video, to be able to analyze them. You remember Toga, I am sure. With Transform, she is able to turn herself into anyone she drinks the blood of. The more blood she drinks, the longer she can appear as that person. Any questions?" Overhaul looked at them, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "You're rather forthcoming, aren't you? Does this mean there are no hard feelings about Magna? I didn't want to kill him, you know." Toga hissed slightly, glaring. "You mean her?" Deku put a hand on Toga's arm. "He won't make the mistake again. Don't worry, Toga," he said, giving Overhaul a pointed look. "Now, it's pointless to beat around the bush, Overhaul. The more you know about us, the quicker you can put us to work and the quicker we can be done working here. So let me repeat myself. Do you have any questions for us?" There was a tense pause, everyone silent, and for the briefest moment, Deku was worried that everything was going to backfire. Finally, Overhaul turned and gave a short nod to Nemoto. Nemoto turned, activating his quirk. "Did you tell us the truth?" he said, his voice almost hypnotic. Deku spoke before he could even think. "Yes, I told the truth. Is there anything else we need to know, or should know about both of your quirks?" "No," Toga and Deku both said, Nemoto's quirk washing over the pair. "To them. And do either of you have a plan to betray us? Did Shigaraki tell you to double-cross Overhaul?" "No to both," Toga said, speaking up. Deku nodded along with her. Most would not have noticed, but to Deku's trained eye, he could see Overhaul relax slightly in his seat. "Good. Now, I will have someone show you to your rooms. You will be staying here in the house during the duration of our partnership." "Can we share a room?" Toga asked, smiling and flashing her fangs. "Deku-kun and I always share a room. There would only be one bed. I hardly sleep at night anymore, so it's not a big deal," Deku said with a wave of his hand. "We'd be happy to see the room now, though. I would like to get my laptop set up. After all, I am best known for my hacking. I am assuming these skills will be put to use while we're here." "Bakugu! Hey, wait up!" Kirishima called, chasing after Bakugu as the blonde walked towards the dorms. "What do you want, shitty hair?" "I just wanted to check on you. Ever since your friend died, you've dash." Bakugu spun around, snarling. "He wasn't my friend." After seeing Kirishima's startled, almost scared expression, Bakugu sagged and hung his head. "He wasn't my friend really. We grew up together and I was it to him. After everything with the training camp and the league wanting to kidnap me to convert me, I realized how much of an a-hole I've been to everyone in my life, especially to Dash, especially to Izuku. I mean, I have to be a pretty shitty excuse of a person for the villains to think I would ever join them. So I thought maybe I could get better. I'd been writing a letter to send him. An apology letter. I would have gone to talk to him in person, but I was pretty sure that he would have just run from me. Diamond Nerd was pretty scared of me by the end of middle school. But I couldn't get the FANG letter right. And now it doesn't matter. He's dead and none of it matters. Bakugo felt his eyes starting to burn, tears threatening to well. He squeezed them shut, ducking his head even further and bringing his shoulder up to his ears as he balled his hands into fists, waiting for Kirishima to say something. Instead, he felt tentative fingers touching one of his fists, gently prying it open. Kirishima slipped his hand into Bakugo's, giving it a small squeeze. I'm so sorry, Bakugo. You didn't get to say goodbye at all, and that has to be really hard. Come on, how about we go up to my dorm, make a bunch of snacks, and you can tell me more about him. If you want, you can read your letter to me. I can help you finish it and we can take it to his grave and leave it there. How does that sound? A shuddering breath slipped from Bakugo's lips as he sagged again, leaning forward just enough to press his forehead into Kirishima's shoulder. Yeah, that sounds good. You better not tell anyone about this though. My lips are sealed, bro. Now come on. I bet if we hurry, we can grab some of those fancy candy bars Yaoyorozu bought. For everyone before Kaminari gets into them. Deku frowned at the computer screen, his eyes red-rimmed. He sat back in his seat, barely suppressing a groan as his back popped. Magna had always gotten on him about hunching over his computer while he worked. She would always tell him that he was going to ruin his back, or that he needed to get blue light glasses to protect his eyes from his computer screen, or the reason he had trouble sleeping was because of all of his screen time. Like the teenage boy he didn't listen. Now she wasn't there to lecture him. As soon as he had arrived at the room he and Toga would be sharing, he began setting up his rig, which included a hotspot so he wouldn't be attached to the Yakuza's internet. It would be way too easy for them to track what he was doing if he was on their network. The Yakuza had left them alone for the rest of the day, saying there was business to attend to. That worked just fine for them. Toga sharpened her knives and doodled in one of Deku's notebooks while Deku focused on his hacking work. He quickly finished up the few jobs he had, sending them either to Shigaraki or to Jiren. Then he had switched to quietly drilling through the Yakuza's firewalls to see the details of what they were working on. It wasn't really a betrayal, so technically Deku hadn't lied when he was questioned. He just answered in half-truths. There was no plan to betray or get back at the Yakuza. Just a desire to. He hadn't been able to find anything concrete yet. After reading a few files on the creation of the Quirk erasing bullets, Deku had tried to find any information on the thing they called the source. Whatever this source was, it was finicky and the material needed to create these bullets could only be extracted with overhaul present. When Deku hit a dead end on that, he switched to looking up a map of the facility. It wasn't until he found a map of the underground tunnels and labs that he found something of interest. There was a room simply labeled Lab 3. From the looks of the maps and blueprints, it was heavily secured, much more so than the other labs. It was also much smaller and appeared to have a tiny bathroom attached to it. There were sensors built into the walls and the door, not only tracking if someone came in, but if someone came out. In the hallway outside the door, there were numerous cameras, each angled so that there were virtually no blind spots, ensuring no one could sneak up to the door. Inside the room, there were 3 cameras, including one in the bathroom. Lab 3 looked like a prison cell. Toga, wake up, Deku whispered, turning in his seat to face the bed where Toga slept. She snuffled slightly and burrowed further under the blanket. Rolling his eyes, Deku picked up one of the pillows she had knocked off the bed and tossed it at her. As soon as the pillow made contact, she came up swinging, her knife glinting in the moonlight as it arced through the air. Good, you're awake. Come look at this and tell me what you think. Huffing and cursing under her breath, she climbed out of bed and came to stare at his laptop with blurry eyes. It's a map, she sighed. You woke me up to look at a map. No, this is the blueprint. If you want to look at the map, I can pull it up. But look here at this room. I think they are hiding something important here. I can get us in there if you want to check it out. Deku shook his head. I can probably pull up one of the camera feeds from inside the room. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't the only one who thought it was weird. Oh, it's definitely weird. Let's see the video. With a few keystrokes, Deku hacked one of the security cameras to pull up the feed. He was right. It was practically a jail cell. And inside was a little girl. She looked skinny, maybe a little too skinny, and her long curly white hair was tangled and messy. The girl was sitting on her bed, a few toys laying on the ground, barely touched. She had her knees drawn to her chest and arms wrapped around them, pulling herself into a tight ball. Her big red eyes were fixed on the door, as if she was waiting for something. When she shifted, making herself a little more comfortable, her hair moved to reveal a little horn growing off-center on her forehead. Deku, Toga said, voice strained and barely above a whisper. What is that on her arms and legs? He swallowed thickly. Bandages. She's covered in bandages. I think they are experimenting on her or something. We have to tell Shigaraki. We have to tell someone, but should we really tell him? Deku glanced up at Toga. Will Shigaraki actually help her? You always told me that he isn't the best when it comes to empathy and shit like that. That made Toga pause, her eyes flicking between Deku and the girl on the computer screen. She bit at her lip while she thought, fidgeting with the knife in her hand. If we don't tell Shigaraki, who would we tell? You can't seriously be suggesting we tell a hero. You and I both know they can't be trusted. We can't trust the spotlight heroes, I know. Half of them are corrupt and the other half are covering for the others. But what about the underground heroes? They are heroes just to do good, not for money or fame. And they take on cases others won't touch. A case like this would be perfect for an underground hero, Deku said, gesturing to the computer screen as he finished. Toga nodded along, a pensive look on her face. Those guys are definitely true heroes. Stain would have approved of them. But what would the heroes do with her? Probably put her in witness protection. The Yakuza would want to try and get her back or kill her to keep her from talking. In witness protection, she could completely disappear and be safe. No one would have to know. And it would get back at Overhaul for what he did to Magna and Compress. I don't know, Toga said, shuffling nervously. Maybe we should still run the plan past Shigaraki. I really don't think we should. At least not yet. He's great at going up against heroes and he'll do a great job reshaping hero society, but he wouldn't know what to do about a little girl being held captive by the Yakuza. If the underground heroes fail, then we can go to him. I guess you have a point. And if the heroes actually do save her, we can always say that the heroes came before we could do anything. He doesn't have to know. But can you get a message out to a hero without anyone knowing? Deku snorted. Look who you're talking to. Of course I can. Aizawa's phone buzzed just as he finished hauling Shinso up onto a rooftop after the teen had misjudged a jump. Sorry, sensei, Shinso said, panting. Call me Eraserhead when we're working. Aizawa grumbled as he pulled his phone out of his pocket. When he lit up the screen, he saw that he had an email, which was odd considering the time of night it was. The subject line simply read, To Eraserhead. Which, under the circumstances, was rather ominous. A million different possibilities ran through Aizawa's head, from a missing student to a murdered husband. Immediately, Aizawa turned on the program he'd downloaded years ago to scan emails for any dangerous attachments. While that ran, he called Hizashi. Hello? Joe? You alright? Came Hizashi's sleepy voice. Hold on, I need to grab my hearing aids. Aizawa breathed a sigh of relief. Sorry to scare you. Just wanted to check in. Everything is good on your end? Yeah, except for your fat cat trying to hog the bed. She's a menace. Nothing like my perfect angel boy. Keep telling yourself that. Talk to you later. As Aizawa hung up, Shinso gave him a curious look. Who was that? None of your concern, brat. Keep a lookout for a minute while I read this email. When he opened the email, there was an attachment and a short message. Shai Hasaikai. Underground Labs. Get her out of there. Deku. Aizawa knew that name. Seeing that name made him feel like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over his head. The hero world had heard whispers about Deku, but nothing concrete. Some weren't even convinced that Deku existed. But here on his phone, Aizawa had proof. Deku was real. Against his better judgment, Aizawa opened the attachment to find a video. The timestamp showed it was from that day, only an hour before. It looked to be footage from a security camera, the angle high and wide and the video grainy. A small girl with white hair and a short horn sat on her bed, wide-eyed and terrified. She looked too thin for Aizawa's comfort, and based on the bandages on her arms and legs, she was injured. "Who's she?" Aizawa nearly fumbled his phone, startled by Shinso appearing at his shoulders so suddenly. At least he knew that Shinso's stealth training had paid off. "I thought I told you to keep lookout." "Yeah, but then you got a weird look on your face, so I wanted to see what was going on." Aizawa barely repressed the urge to roll his eyes as he shoved his phone into his pocket. "We're going back to campus now." "Wow," Shinso said, straightening to his full height. "This is serious?" "Very. I need to speak with Nizu and show him this video. I want him to confirm it's real before I bring it up to Night Eye." "Is this about the Yakuza?" Aizawa nodded. "Looks like it. And it may be tied to the League of Villains as well. I'll tell you more when we are at a secure location. I don't want to go into detail out in the open like this." "Lead the way." 2 days. 2 days and no sign of the heroes. No email back, no report on the news, nothing. Deku was starting to get worried. Did Eraserhead not take the email seriously? There should have been some sort of movement by now, right? Had Eraserhead even read the email? Toga had offered to snag some blood and make a trip to UA to see what the pro-hero was doing, but Deku had shot that idea down. It was too risky. If the heroes figured her out, she'd be arrested on the spot. And if Shigaraki found out, he'd kill her. Deku had considered hacking the UA camera system to see if he could spot the underground hero, but decided against it after he realized that Nizu was most likely the one to design it. Deku knew he was reckless, but he didn't have a death wish. He knew better than to mess with Nizu. Maybe it was time for more drastic measures. With a sigh, Deku opened a new tab and began typing another email to Eraserhead. He attached another video, this time of a Yakuza thug dragging the girl out of her room, and he attached the blueprint of the basement and labs. Deku typed up a quick message and sent it, sitting back in his seat. "If that doesn't get him moving, I don't know what will," he mumbled to himself. Toga sat up from where she was sprawled on the bed, a groggy look on her face as she yawned. "What are you doing, Deku-kun?" "Trying to get Eraserhead to get off his butt." "Ooh, let me see," Toga said excitedly, scrabbling out of the bed and looking over his shoulder to see the email he just sent. She snorted once before starting to read aloud. "Eraserhead, are you too busy fing your husband to save an imprisoned child, or are you just lazy? Do you need more proof that she's in danger? How about this video? Here are the blueprints for the building and her cell. Get up and come get her. Let me know if I need to prop the door open for you or something." Deku, you really have no chill. "And is Eraserhead really married?" Deku nodded. "Yeah, it's not common knowledge, but I figured it out. You'll never guess who. Do I get a hint?" "He's loud." Toga paused and thought for a moment. Suddenly she gasped. "It's All Might." "No, dumps, it's Present Mike, literally the loudest hero out there." "You make an excellent point, but please consider this, I am stupid." Deku shook his head, laughing. "You're not stupid, Toga. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Before she could respond, Deku's computer chimed, alerting them to the fact that there was a new email. They looked back to the screen and both of them smiled when they saw who it was from. "I thought that email might get his attention. Mention the husband and he'll panic," Deku said, running multiple programs to ensure the email was safe to open. "Let's see what he has to say." Aizawa's phone went off in class, which was a first. His ever-present poker face remained intact as he pulled his phone from his pocket. When he lit the screen, his eyes went wide. After a moment of fiddling with his phone and reading something, his head snapped up, his gaze set on the confused students. "Stay here and study until I get back. Shinso with me. Now." Shinso was out of his seat before Aizawa even finished the sentence, quickly following after his sensei. He had to lengthen his strides to keep up with Aizawa as they hurried towards the teacher's lounge. "Aizawa-sensei, what's going on?" "Deku emailed me again. He knows something about me that he shouldn't." Shinsu's mouth went dry and he felt a heavy pit in his stomach. He knew how secretive Aizawa was. For this villain to be able to have any sort of information on him was terrifying, but also somehow slightly impressive. When they reached the teacher's lounge, Aizawa threw the door open, startling the scant few teachers inside. "Mike, we need to talk." "Now," Aizawa said, an edge to his voice that clearly put all the teachers on edge. Present Mike didn't even question it. He was on his feet and out the door within seconds. When he opened his mouth to ask what was going on, Aizawa put a hand up, signaling for him to be quiet. "We need Nizu for this too. I'll explain as soon as we are in his office." When they got to the principal's office, the door was already open and there were cups of tea set out for each of them. "Midnight called and told me that you seemed rather distressed, Aizawa," Nizu said, his voice even and calm. "I checked the footage and saw you were on your way to see me. Please tell me what the matter is." Shinso let his teachers slip in ahead of him, quietly closing the door to the office behind him. As he sat down, Nizu nudged one of the cups closer to him, his smile kind even if his black eyes expressed little emotion. Shinso gladly took it, the warmth of the tea feeling nice against his suddenly cold hands. "Deku emailed me again," Aizawa said, pulling his phone out and handing it to Nizu. "He knows about Hizashi." Shinso frowned, confused on who Hizashi was. He went to ask what was going on, but was interrupted by Present Mike spluttering. "Again? What do you mean by that? Deku has emailed you before and you didn't think to tell me? I didn't want to worry you. Besides, the contents of the email are confidential. It relates to a case I'm working with Shinso." Aizawa paused, running a hand through his hair, a nearly anxious gesture. "The only reason I brought you in now is because Deku mentioned you in the email." Well, that answered Shinsu's question. Mike-sensei was Hizashi. This revelation only raised more questions though. Why was Deku talking about Present Mike? What did it matter to Aizawa and to the case? And why did Aizawa-sensei call Present Mike by his first name? Nizu said nothing but handed the phone to Mike, who snatched it away to quickly read. As his green eyes scanned the screen, his face went pale. "Sheet," he hissed under his breath. Aizawa shot him a glare. "Don't curse in front of a student." "It's okay, I've heard and said worse. But if someone can explain what is going on, I would really appreciate it," Shinso said, his eyes flicking between the two teachers. Mike handed him the phone. As soon as Shinso saw the word husband, he nearly dropped both his tea and the phone. Aizawa snatched it away, pocketing his phone again. He kept his eyes fixed on the ground, looking almost nervous. "Now you know. You're not allowed to tell anyone. And I mean anyone. Do I make myself clear?" Shinso wordlessly nodded before taking a shaky sip of his tea. Mike was looking him over, a careful and calculating look in his eyes that Shinso had never seen before. "Do you have any questions, little listener?" It took a moment, but Shinso eventually managed to clear his throat and speak. "You guys are gay then?" "I am," Aizawa said, still not looking at Shinso. Mike raised his hand. "I'm bi. And before you ask, Sho and I have been together since high school. Got married when we were no kids, but we do have 2 cats. We've kept the relationship a secret from everyone except a few close friends and trusted coworkers." Shinso nodded again. Nizu watched the boy carefully, noticing how he was bouncing his knee and biting his lip, his eyes still looking between the two teachers. "Shinso, if you have a question, now is the time to ask it," Nizu prompted. "This isn't a topic I see being brought up again in the future." Heaving a shaky sigh, Shinso let his eyes drop to look at the floor, one of his hands coming up to rub at the back of his neck. In that moment he looked very much like his mentor, which brought a small smile to Nizu's face. "Why did you keep it a secret?" Shinso asked, his tone oddly even and emotionless. "The villains Sho goes up against are the type that would happily try to kidnap and use me against him, so we thought it best to keep our relationship quiet, especially when we first started out. We've considered coming out now that we focus more on our teaching jobs, but we still haven't made any decision on it." "So, you're allowed to be gay and be hero?" Aizawa almost seemed to shrink into his seat at the question. Mike narrowed his eyes slightly, becoming protective of his husband. "Of course it's allowed. Being gay has no impact on our ability to be good heroes. A number of your peers are gay too, you know this. Shinso, if this is going to be a problem, then maybe you shouldn't be working with Sho for your dash. He cut himself off when he saw the tears welling in Shinsu's. The boy looked both confused and in awe as he continued to stare at the ground. I can be gay and be a hero? He asked, his voice cracking. Aizawa's head whipped up, shock evident on his face. Mike stared on, his mouth hanging open as the boy teared up. I thought that I'd have to hide it. I already have a villainous quirk, and I thought if anyone found out I was gay, I wouldn't be allowed to be a hero. Thought that the commission would pull my license or something, since they are always talking about how heroes have to be perfect role models and stuff like that. I know there are gay heroes, but they are the ones in the spotlight with good quirks, like the others in one. Aizawa always says that he gets crap for his quirk, like I do, so if he can be gay and married then maybe I. Without a word, Aizawa reached across Mike and wrapped Shinso in his arms, letting the boy bury his face into his shoulder. Aizawa petted Shinsu's wild purple hair, smoothing it only for it to pop back into place. It's okay, kid. I get it, Aizawa breathed. I get it. I'm so happy, Shinso hiccuped. Then, with a gasp, he wrenched himself backwards. A villain knows you two are married. Sheet, this is bad. It's definitely not great, Mike said with a nod. Who is this girl that Deku is talking about though? And what is this case? It took them about 5 minutes to fill Mike in. He listened quietly, nodding along. Once they finished telling him everything, he didn't speak for a moment, soaking it in. And we haven't gone to save the girl because, why? He asked. We don't have enough information, Aizawa said. Shinso and I have been patrolling the area, but we don't have enough evidence to legally break in and find the girl. If there even is a girl. This could be a trap, Nizu pointed out. Mike poked at Aizawa's shoulder and put his hand out, making a give me gesture. Let's email Deku back then. Tell him that we need actual proof that this is legit. If he provides it, great. If not, we continue investigating, he said. Aizawa shook his head. I am not letting you email a random villain, especially not when he's making thinly veiled threats against you. It's not a thinly veiled threat. He's making it clear he knows about you and that he isn't happy with me. That means he'll go after you. This is exactly why we've kept our relationship a secret. We shouldn't dismiss the idea too quickly, Nizu said, leaning forward in his seat. Let me craft the email. Please hand me the phone. Groaning, Aizawa handed him the phone. Nizu took it, read the email one last time, and then began to type. Deku, you must understand that these things take time, Nizu read aloud as he typed. Can you provide any more evidence regarding this girl? At this point, you have provided little to no evidence that this is a legitimate case. I need assurance that this is not a trap set by the League or by the Yakuza. Sincerely, Eraserhead. Nizu sent the email and then handed the phone back to Aizawa. You could have tried a little harder to sound like Sho, Mike said, almost laughing. Nizu frowned. In all of his emails to me, that is how he sounds. Yeah, because you're my boss. I have to sound professional. Shinso picked his tea back up, not caring that it had already gone cold. Let's hope Deku just thinks that Aizawa is being formal because he's talking to a villain. A few minutes later, the phone chimed. Aizawa opened the email and rolled his eyes. It's Deku. Hi Nizu, I'm pretty sure I emailed Eraserhead, not you. I guess I should have assumed he would bring this to you. Maybe you can light a fire under his butt and get him moving. You should sympathize with the kid. The Yakuza are using her for research and experimentation. I can try to get footage of overhaul in her, but it won't be easy. They don't keep cameras in the rooms that they do the work in. As for the matter of whether or not this is a trap, you're just going to have to take my word for it. No matter what I say, you will think this is a trap. All I care about is that the girl is saved and put in witness protection, or something similar. I sent this case to Eraserhead to handle it because he is an underground hero and slightly more trustworthy than the spotlight heroes. If you have to bring other heroes in on this, fine, I don't give a shit. Just do your FNG job and save the girl. Deku sure does have a mouth on him, Shinso mumbled. Mike snorted, nodding. Nizu pressed his paws together and sat back in his chair. "How curious," he said, a pensive look on his narrow face. Deku knew right away that it was me that drafted the email, not Aizawa. This means he has a history of reading either my writing or Aizawa's. Or perhaps he made the correct assumption that Aizawa would not speak like this to a villain and, thinking of who Aizawa has the most contact with, concluded I was the one to send the email. "Does it really matter?" Mike asked. "The bottom line is that this dude is scary, smart, and possibly spying on all of us. We need to start planning." "How could you tell so fast it was Nizu, Dekun?" Eraserhead wouldn't care if it was a trap. He's knowingly run into traps like 1,000,000 times before just because it meant there was a chance of saving someone. There was no way Eraserhead wrote the email. Also, it is the middle of a school day. Only people Eraserhead would talk to about my email would be Present Mike and Nizu. And I don't think Present Mike has ever signed an email with "sincerely" in his life. Especially not to a villain. So that left Nizu. Your brain scares me sometimes. There were footsteps in the hall outside of Toga and Deku's door. People were running past, their voices raised. Deku had been dozing, flopped halfway across the end of the bed. Toga has her back against the headboard, her feet resting on Deku's lower back. When they heard the racket outside their room, Deku bolted up, his eyes wide and his chest heaving. Toga whipped out a knife, her teeth bared with a hiss. Neither reacted well to being startled. "What the F is going on?" Deku asked gruffly. "Don't know." "Come on," Toga said as she got out of the bed, her knuckles white with how tightly she gripped the handle of her knife. Before she opened the door, she picked up Deku's mask and tossed it to him. He quickly slipped it on and flipped his hood up. As he opened the door and slipped into the hall, something small and fast came flying up and crashed into him, nearly knocking him to the ground. Deku instinctively wrapped his arms around what had hit him as he stumbled backwards into Toga. When he looked down, he found himself staring into the bright red, watery eyes of the girl from the lab. "Please don't let him hurt me again," she whimpered, clutching him tightly. "Eri, time to go back to your room," a cold, steely voice said. Deku looked up and found himself looking at Overhaul. The masked man walked calmly down the hall, his eyes locked on the girl, Eri. She buried her face in Deku's stomach, whimpering quietly. He found his own hold on the girl tightening. "Who's this, Overhaul?" Deku asked, trying to keep his voice light. "Your daughter?" "Hardly." "Eri, come here." "Now." Toga swooped in and ran a hand over the back of Eri's head, smoothing her tangled hair. "Hi, Eri-chan. You have such pretty hair. I would love to braid it. Think I could do that for you?" Eri pulled her face out of where she had hidden it in Deku's jacket and looked up at Toga, her red eyes watery. "Braid?" the girl whispered, seeming almost confused by the word. Overhaul reached out and snagged the girl's arm, wrenching her away from the pair of teens with a forceful pull. Eri let out a sharp cry of pain as she stumbled backwards. "We don't have time for this," Overhaul snarled, shoving the girl towards one of his henchmen. The man grabbed Eri and lifted her, tossing her over his shoulder and walking off down the hall. All the while, Eri whimpered and sent a pleading look Deku's way. As Eri disappeared around the corner, Deku calmly tilted his head. "Want to tell me who that was?" he asked, his gaze cold. "You're the analyst, you tell me." Deku paused, running through his options. He could take a risk and lay out his theory, or he could play dumb. He ran through the possible outcomes, weighing the risks and the benefits. Finally, making his decision, he spoke. "She's your source, isn't she? Somehow, she is used in making your drags. Is she the source for the quirk removal bullets, or is she for the quirk enhancement drags? Is it her quirk? That is my guess. That or her DNA. Is it made from her blood? Or is it from her muscle cells? Muscle cells would be much more substantial than blood cells. What about Dash?" Toga elbowed him, breaking him from his rambling. Deku ducked his head, pretending to be embarrassed. I got carried away again. Sorry about that. I've been a fan of science since I was little. Maybe in another life I would have been a scientist." "A fan of science?" Overhaul asked, narrowing his eyes and ping his head. "You aren't fishing for information on the girl?" "I am more curious about the process of creating your drags." If the process starts with her, then I want to know how. Shigaraki sending me here wasn't a mistake. He sent me so I could be an asset. It was supposed to be a show of goodwill. He knows I am the smartest in the league and he thought you knew that too. Toga sniffed and looked down her nose at Overhaul. If you don't want Deku-kun's help, then we'll just go back to sitting in our room. You know, doing nothing and wasting time. It's starting to get really boring though. And you do not want a bored Toga on your hands? Deku said. He gave a little shiver, acting as though he were remembering a particularly bad incident. His statement wasn't exactly a lie though. A bored Toga was a dangerous Toga. She posed a threat to his sanity when she got bored, always chattering and wanting attention. Overhaul eyed Deku and Toga for another moment before speaking. I will consider what role you will play in this. You will both hear from me soon, he said. With a final glare, he turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the hall. The pair slipped back into their room. As soon as the door was closed, Deku ripped off his mask and threw himself at his computer, his hands flying to the keyboard. He quickly pulled up the video footage of the hall, carefully copying the clip of Eri's escape attempt and her being forcefully dragged back to her room. Deku only paused for a moment to add a quick blur over his head in the footage. He knew Toga didn't care if anyone saw her face, especially since she never bothered to change her name. Then he attached the video to an email to Eraserhead and sent it with a short message. Is this enough proof? The conference room at Sir Night-Eye's agency was crowded. At the head of the table sat Sir Night-Eye with Mirio just to his right. Next to Mirio was Tamaki, who looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. Nijire was beside him, babbling and pestering poor Tsu, who was shrinking back in her seat and leaning into Uraraka. Uraraka was talking animatedly with Kirishima, who sat across the table beside Fatgum. At the other end of the table, facing Sir Night-Eye, was Nizu. Aizawa was behind him, Shinso between him and Kirishima. And finally, beside Fatgum were Rocklock and Ryukyu. Bubble Girl and Centipeder were still setting things up for the meeting, bustling around the room. Shinso could tell that Sir Night-Eye's patience was nearly at its limit. He was glaring at the room, his face growing more stern every time someone made a loud noise. Shinso shot a look at Aizawa, making eye contact with his mentor. Aizawa easily read the look in Shinso's eyes, the two silently communicating their amusement at Night-Eye's suffering. Let's get started, Naya finally said, standing up beside the massive TV screen hanging on the wall. He pulled out a remote from his pocket and pressed a button. Up on the screen, a picture of Overhaul appeared, creating a somber mood in the room. As you all know, we have been investigating Overhaul and his band of Yakuza thugs who have been distributing quirk enhancement drags. We have recently discovered that he is also selling quirk erasing bullets that will temporarily strip you of your quirk. There is talk about possible permanent versions of these bullets being made, though we have nothing concrete yet. Rocklock leaned forward, his crossed arms resting on the table. Yeah, we know that, Knight. What's the real reason you had us all meet here? He's getting to it, Aizawa snapped, sending an icy look towards the other pro. Thank you, Eraserhead, Night-Eye said with a nod. Eraserhead has recently been contacted by the villain known as Deku Dash. Before he could continue, a murmur went up in the room. The UA students, all besides Shinso, looked confused, whispering to each other and asking about the villain they had never heard of. The pros looked startled, most having heard very little about Deku. The only things they knew about the villain were that he was smart and he was dangerous. Once everyone quieted, Night-Eye continued. As I was saying, the villain Deku, who is a known associate of the League of Villains, contacted Eraserhead. He sent an email with video footage of a young girl, who has clearly been abused, and requested that Eraserhead save the girl. The location he gave was the hideout of the Shai Hasaikai. Sir Night-Eye pressed another button on the remote and brought up the video footage of the girl sitting on her bed. The students in the room all let out small gasps. Tamaki fully ducked his head and pressed it into Mirio's firm shoulder, while Nijire reached out and grabbed Tsuyu's wrist in one hand. With her other hand, she reached around behind Tsu to grasp Uraraka's shoulder, almost as though she were trying to keep the girls close to protect them. Fatgum turned to look at Aizawa, a serious look on his normally jovial face. When did you get this? Last night? This morning? Have you started drafting a plan for us to go in and get her? I got it about 2 weeks ago, Aizawa said. I had begun to dash. Fat Gum was out of his seat and towering over Aizawa. Kirishima sunk down in his chair, startled by his mentor's sudden movement. Shinso, on the other hand, straightened in his seat and grabbed at the capture scarf hanging from his neck, ready to defend Aizawa. You've let this girl sit in hell for 2 weeks? What kind of hero are ya? We should be storming in there right now to rescue her. Fat Gum roared, his hands rolled into massive fists. If I may interject, Nizu said, his calm voice cutting through the tension in the room. Eraserhead brought this to my attention immediately. Together, we began making plans and preparing for a rescue. We needed more evidence and proof beyond the word of a villain to legally be able to go into the residence to retrieve her. Sir Night Eye will explain in detail if you would please sit. Night Eye gave Nizu a thankful nod as Fat Gum grudgingly returned to his seat. Slowly, Shinso let his hand fall from his capture weapon. Nizu is correct. They began the process to prepare to save the girl. In the meantime, Deku reached out again to see why no one had taken action. Nizu crafted a response posing as Eraserhead, which Deku immediately saw through. They asked Deku to provide some more proof that the girl was actually with Overhaul. Late last night he sent us this video. Shinso leaned forward at this, wanting to get a good look at the video. Aizawa hadn't shown it to him yet, so he would be seeing it for the first time with everyone else. The footage showed some men running around in a hall, clearly searching for something. After the men had cleared the hall, the girl came sprinting in. A door suddenly opened and out stepped a pair of people. The girl ran face first into who Shinso assumed was Deku. He had a slim build and was rather short. He wore what looked like simple jeans, red shoes, and a black hoodie. A blur had been added in, hiding his face and head. Beside him was Toga, clear as day. She was staring at the girl in surprise as Deku wrapped his arms around her. And then, Overhaul stepped into the hall. Some words were exchanged, though the video had no audio so they couldn't hear anything. Toga reached out at one point and gently ran her hand over the girl's hair. Overhaul looked downright murderous as he grabbed the girl and flung her off to another man, who simply hoisted the girl over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes, carrying her away. Night Eye paused the footage, leaving Overhaul, Deku, and Toga on the screen. As you can see, we now have proof that the LOV is working with Overhaul and that this girl is being held captive by the Yakuza. I have gathered us all here today to discuss the rescue. The girl is valuable to Overhaul somehow, so while he may be harming her, there is no reason to believe that he will kill her. This gives us a little time to plan and make sure we get this right. We should be going and getting her now. She's just a kid. Fat Gum snapped. Mirio jumped in, defending Night Eye. Sir's right. While I don't like the idea of that girl being there, if we rush in, they could move her or they could get scared and kill her just to keep her from us. We need to have a 100% perfect plan that won't fail. If we don't, we could end up being the cause of her death. Well said, Mirio, Night said, giving him a small smile. Is no one else concerned about the League being a part of this? Or that maybe this is a trap set up by Deku? Ryukyu asked, eyeing the screen. It is a possibility that we have to accept. Kirishima cautiously raised his hand. Night Eye gave him a surprised look before nodding, indicating that he should speak. Who is this Deku guy? Never heard of him, he asked. Tsu nodded, joining in. And who says Deku is a guy? Looks kinda small. And Deku and Toga were sharing a room together. Maybe Deku is a woman. Eyewitness accounts from arrested criminals say that Deku is male, Aizawa says. This is the first time that we have had any visuals on him. I'll admit he's smaller than I expected. The little that we know is that Deku is a hacker for hire aligned with the LOV. He doesn't do on-site work with them, but he does stuff behind the scenes for them. Jiren, an underground broker, is the point of contact for outside buyers to get Deku's services. No one is sure of his quirk, with witnesses ranging from saying he has a fire-based quirk, to a gas or pheromone-based quirk, to mental quirks, such as analysis or intelligence. No one is positive and no one can give much details. They don't want to cross him and state that he is unnerving. Rocklock jerked his head towards the screen. Froppy has a point though. Deku is tiny. He looks like he's only a few inches taller than Toga. Maybe we should consider that he may be a kid, like Toga. Obviously villains have no issues using kids in their schemes. And apparently we aren't much better. You guys can't seriously be considering using these high school students while going up against the Yakuza. I don't like it any more than you, Rocklock, Aizawa said, letting his head hang slightly. I made Nizu and Night Eye promise that if the kids are used in the rescue, then they have to have minor roles. At most, I want them holding the perimeter. With Yakuza and the LOV being involved, I think it is too much of a risk for students to be involved. I hardly think we should count out all the students. Mirio here is more than capable. All of the third years are. They will be graduating in a matter of months and will be fully fledged heroes, Night Eye said. Aizawa's frown deepened. They're still kids. They are all they can make their own choices. I thought that perhaps this argument would arise. That is why I have created multiple, detailed plans for us to review and build on, Nizu said. Each involves the students to varying degrees. Should we begin reviewing them and decide which would be best? 2 days after Deku sent the new video to Eraserhead, he got an email from Nizu. Deku, please be aware, we will be making a move on the Yakuza soon. Eraserhead and I thought it to only be fair to warn you. We cannot give you the date, time, or any details. While we may believe you that there is a child in need, we do not trust that this is not a trap. If you and Ms. Toga do not want to be arrested during this raid, I highly suggest you leave as soon as possible. We only ask that you do not warn the Yakuza. Thank you for your help. If you wish to provide information in the future, do not hesitate to reach out. Deku jumped up from his computer, catching Toga's attention. What's wrong? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her big yellow eyes flashed in the low light. We need to go. The heroes have planned the raid and could be here at any time. Should I call Kurojiiri? No, we can't call him or any of the others. They would all tell Shigaraki that we're leaving the Yakuza and he'd wonder why we left. Toga was already up and throwing her clothes into her duffel bag. Dabi wouldn't. He'd help us out. Maybe if we had something for him. Dabi never does anything for free. She didn't have a rebuttal to that. Toga simply zipped her bag shut and ran over to help Deku to pack his computer gear. Just as they were wrapping up the last cord, there was a loud knock on the door. The pair froze, staring at each other with a combination of fear and shock. After a beat, Deku grabbed his mask, shoving it on as fast as he could. He flipped his hood up just as Toga opened the door to reveal Chronostasis. Overhaul has requested Deku meet him in his lab, the man said, his voice firm. Toga glared up at him. Where Deku goes, I go. Chronostasis tried to stare her down, neither speaking a word. After a good minute or so, he finally sighed and nodded. You may come as well. Keep quiet and keep your hands to yourself. She grinned dangerously, her fangs bared, as Deku came up to her side, bumping his shoulder against hers. We don't want to keep the bossmen waiting, now do we? Lead the way, Chronostasis. The walk down to the labs was silent, but that didn't mean that Deku's mind was quiet. His thoughts were racing, mapping out the way through the building while simultaneously trying to figure out why the hell Overhaul wanted to see him. If Overhaul was set at him, either for hacking his system or for their conversation in the hall, then Chronostasis wouldn't have let Toga come. It would have been too risky. Sure, the Yakuza easily outnumbered them, but Overhaul couldn't kill both of them and managed to escape Shigaraki's wrath. If it was just one of them, then maybe he'd get away with it, stating that it was a necessary sacrifice, but definitely not both. And Overhaul was smart enough to know that. When they entered the lab, Deku felt his stomach twist into a knot and every hair on his body stood on end. In the center of the lab, her wrists strapped to the arms of the chair she sat on, was Eri. Her eyes were watery as she tracked Overhaul, who was walking around the lab preparing things. For once, he wasn't wearing his coat, but he still wore his bird-like mask and gloves. When he spotted Deku and Toga, he straightened himself to his full height, looking down at them. Thank you, Chronostasis, you may leave. Deku, I see you brought Toga with you. That's not a problem, is it? No, though I do not see her having anything of value to add to the conversation. Deku had to catch Toga's wrist to keep her from grabbing the knife at her belt. You were interested in my process, Overhaul said, continuing as though nothing had happened. I thought that perhaps you would like to observe and at the end, provide any insights that you may have. As Overhaul turned around to face one of the many lab tables, Deku's eyes flicked to Eri, who was now staring back at him with pleading eyes. He could feel his heart twist in his chest. Something bad was going to happen here and there was nothing that he could do. What I am hoping that you can help with is mass production. As of right now, I can produce only a few bullets at a time. The source of the drag is limited, after all. You mean the girl Eri? Deku said, his voice flat and emotionless. He wasn't about to let anything slip to Overhaul. Correct. If I take too much from her, she'll die, obviously. And then I would be without my source. And the process for extraction is difficult, more so than it should be. Overhaul turned to finally face Eri, his cold eyes glaring down on her. She whimpered and ducked her head, trying to shrink further into her seat. I'm sorry, she whispered. If only you weren't cursed, Eri. You could do so much better if your quirk wasn't the way it is. Where did you think you were going to go when you tried to run before? I'm the only one who can make sure you can't hurt people. Or were you wanting to kill people? Was that it, Eri? Do you want to kill more people? No. No, I don't. I'll be good, I promise. Tihich, Overhaul shook his head. It's pathetic how weak you are. Unlovable. How could anyone but me want you? Eri was sobbing, fat tears rolling down her cheeks. A golden, shimmering glow began to encase her, originating from her horn. Slowly, the horn began to grow, the glowing light increasing with it. You killed your father. Completely erased him from existence. Your mother hated you for it, you know. She abandoned you here. She knew we were the only ones who could control your cursed quirk. If you left here, you would only kill more people. You would terrify everyone. Please, Eri hiccuped, begging through her tears. Please don't. They'd lock you away. They would chain you up. They would take you apart and they wouldn't put you together again. They'd slaughter you like a little lamb, Eri. If you left here, I would have to come get you. I would have to kill so many people. Is that what you want? No, she screamed, her voice shrill as the light around her became blinding. Her eyes were wide and panicked as she continued to scream, her nails digging into the arms of the chair. She tried to fight against the restraints again, though if it was because she was scared of Overhaul or because she was scared of herself, Deku wasn't sure. As fast as lightning, Overhaul ripped a glove off and pressed his bare hand to Eri's arm. And the girl was gone. A spray of blood, hanging in a thick mist, hovered over the chair. Less than a second later, Eri was back, shaking and sobbing as she curled into a ball in the chair. Her arms were no longer strapped down, though one of her arms was covered in wet, sticky blood. She hugged it close to her chest as she pulled her knees up to shield herself even more. The golden light was gone and her horn was back to being a small nub on her forehead. In Overhaul's hand was a piece of raw flesh. You see, Deku, I have to force her to activate her quirk. Once it is fully activated, I need only take a sample from her. Overhaul turned to the lab table and set the flesh on a small metal tray. It made a wet, slimy noise as it was dropped on the tray. Unfortunately, she can't control her quirk, so I have to manually deactivate it. Afterwards, I have to process the sample. It takes time, but a sample this size creates one bullet. Only one? Deku asked incredulously. It's a long and arduous process. I have a general idea of how to mass produce once I have the sample, but it's a matter of having enough of the sample. That is where you come in. Toga said nothing as she walked over to another table, scooping up some gauze and medical tape. She settled herself on the floor next to Eri's chair and gently pried the girl's arm away from her chest. Eri whimpered once, though she didn't seem too scared of Toga. Mostly, she just seemed nervous and a little curious about the older girl. Toga quietly dabbed at the open wound, making a conscious effort not to stare at the multitude of scars on Eri's arm. Deku made a show of thinking, tapping a finger to his chin and humming to himself. Remind me how many bullets you have now? Overhaul shot him a sharp look. I didn't tell you how many. Oh well then, how many do you have? For now, Overhaul said, opening a small box that rested on the lab table. Inside were 4 bright red bullets. Next to them was an empty slot, ready for the next bullet. It took a number of years to perfect the formula. The quirk-erasing bullets were the first to be completed. These ones are quirk-destroying. They completely eradicate the quirk factor in the target. I can sell these off to the underground, and then sell the antidote to the heroes. We'll be the problem and the solution. We will be the most powerful force in all of Japan. Deku nodded along with what Overhaul said. I can do some research. There may be someone with a quirk that can help us with the replication. Good. I want your findings as soon as possible. Overhaul stepped away to rinse his hands of the blood and then slipped on fresh gloves. The sweat that had formed on his brow was drying, the danger of the tainted blood now gone. We have to move the base, he stated, watching Toga work. One of my sources has said that the police nearest here are acting odd. Excited, almost. Antsy in a way I don't like. I have a new base already set up. It's much more secure and away from the public eye, so we will have plenty of space to work on mass production. I will finish processing the sample tonight and we will leave early in the morning, just before the sun rises. Have your things ready by then. Out of the corner of his eye, Deku could see that Toga had finished bandaging Eri's arm. Was gathering the bloodied gauze and tossed a handful of it into the trash under Overhaul's vigilante gaze. What Overhaul didn't see was that as she threw away the gauze with one hand, she slipped a few blood-soaked pieces into the pocket of her sweater. Good, Deku thought. She's thinking the same thing I am. They had to get Eri out of here. Tonight. Bakugo burst into Siro's room, slamming the door shut behind him with a bang. Siro, who had been working on some homework, jumped so high out of their seat that they came crashing back down on the floor, spurting curses the whole way. I need to vent and you're the only person in this goddamn school I can talk to about this, so get off the FNG floor and listen to me, Bakugo demanded, his voice a deep growl. Carefully, Siro picked himself up off the floor and ran a hand through their hair to smooth it out. Hi Bakugo. Yes, I'm fine, thank you for the concern. No, I'm not busy at all. Shut up, soy sauce face. I have a problem. Siro ped their head and gestured for Bakugo to continue as they sat down in their chair again. Sighing, Bakugo dropped to sit down on the edge of Siro's bed. So, a while back, this guy that I knew died. Remember that? Siro nodded. Well, Kirishima decided he was going to keep an eye on me or whatever. Always following me around, asking about my feelings and shit. He's the only one I really talked to about the guy who died. And at first, it set me off. Like, I had to have looked so weak, you know? But he didn't judge me or anything. And then, next thing I know, I don't mind being weak around him. I keep wanting to do dumb shit, like make him breakfast or sit by him for movie night, and it doesn't make any FNG sense. Snorting, Siro shook their head. You have a crush. It's simple, dude, I don't get why you're freaking out so bad. Because Midoriya is dead. Bakugo shouted, his hands sparking. He took a shaky breath and let his hands drop back to his lap. The demon nerd is dead and I'm over here, acting all soft over Kirishima. I did a lot of bad shit in the past and Kirishima just didn't care. He told me that he could tell I was working to be better and that he'd help me with it. But I don't deserve that. I don't deserve to be happy when Midoriya is dead. They sat in silence, the room tense. Bakugo's shoulders rose and fell with each shuddering breath he took. Slowly, Siro stood from their chair and moved to sit beside Bakugo on the bed. Each movement was deliberate and telegraphed, giving Bakugo the chance to move away. When he didn't, Siro put their hand on Bakugo's shoulder. Listen man, I don't know what you did in the past, and I don't know anything about Midoriya, but I'm guessing you knew him pretty well, right? Bakugo nodded. I knew the nerd since we were in diapers. We grew up together. He was always following me around and stuff. He liked you, right? He wouldn't want you to sit around making yourself miserable. He'd probably be happy that you're working on yourself. And if Kirishima makes you happy and wants to help you grow as a person, then I bet Midoriya would want you to go for it. Hell, he'd probably think Kirishima was good for you. I know we all think that. So talk to Kirishima and work this out, okay? Bakugo sighed. Maybe you're right. I don't know. It's not like Kirishima likes me like that. You don't know until you talk to him. Fine. Thanks, I guess. You're not horrible at this kind of stuff. Shiro mockingly gasped, putting on a big show of placing a hand to their chest and swaying as though they were swooning. A compliment from Katsuki, King Explosion Murder, Bakugo. I am so honored, my liege. A blessing truly. Snorting, Bakugo shoved Shiro away from him and got up. Shut up, Dunce. Do your homework. As Bakugo closed the door behind him, Shiro smiled and moved back to their desk. Just as they picked up their pencil, the door burst open again. Shiro! Mina shrieked. Kaminari got his tongue stuck in the electrical socket again and we don't know how to get him out. Work was never done for Shiro, the resident therapist parent friend of the Baku squad. A banging on his door startled Shinso from a deep sleep, the first he's managed all week. Groaning, he climbed out of bed and stumbled to the door. When he opened it, he was startled to find both Aizawa and Mike standing there. The teachers looked disheveled. Mick's hair was down and unstyled, hanging loose around his shoulders. His pajamas, which consisted of a pair of plaid flannel pants and a t-shirt, were rumpled from sleep. Aizawa, who had been the one trying to beat Shinsu's door down with his fist, was in a pair of hot pink sweatpants and a black long-sleeve shirt, his hair thrown into a messy bun. What's going on? Shinso asked, dread creeping into his stomach. I thought we didn't have to be up until 4 o'clock to get ready for the raid. There's been a break-in, Aizawa said, his bloodshot eyes round with worry. Nizu said we need to get to his office. Now. Shinso didn't question it. Sure, it was a little weird that the principal would ask a student to tag along with the teachers to help with the break-in, but he figured they needed his quirk for some reason. He quickly grabbed his capture scarf and followed his teachers down the stairs, where they only paused at the front door of the dorms long enough to shove their shoes on, and then they were out into the cold night air. Within minutes, they were sprinting down the hall to Nizu's office. Aizawa hit the door first, barreling in and activating his quirk, sending his hair floating up into the air. Shinso grabbed the end of his scarf and prepared to throw it as Mike put his fists up, ready to DJ punch whoever dared to break onto the campus. The three froze at the sight before them. None other than Himiko Toga sat in one of the chairs facing Nizu's desk. Half of her hair was in a bun on the side of her head, while the hair on the other half was hanging loose just past her shoulders. In her lap was the small white-haired girl from the footage Deku had sent. The girl had a black hoodie wrapped tightly around her as she looked at the three new people in the room with her big red eyes. Toga glanced up from braiding the girl's hair and flashed them a toothy smile before using her own hair tie to secure the end of the girl's braid. In the second chair was a boy. He was short, much shorter than Shinso. His wild, curly green hair was damp with sweat and was sticking to the back of his neck and to his forehead. The boy wore a white t-shirt that Shinso noticed hung off his thin but toned frame. Across the front of the shirt, in rather cutesy handwriting, was the word criminal written in black marker. The boy had turned in his seat to look at them, his green eyes bright. It looked like a smattering of freckles spanned his cheeks, but it was hard to tell since there was blood smeared down the side of his face from a rather nasty-looking cut splitting his eyebrow. A piece of navy blue cloth, which looked to have been ripped from Toga's skirt, was tied around the boy's arm. The cloth was covered in fresh blood, leading Shinso to believe that the boy had been injured there as well. Nizu sat at his desk quietly sipping at his tea. An odd assortment of weapons and support gear were piled in the middle of the desk. Nizu was looking it all over and glanced up when he heard the door open. Glad you all could join us. I would like you all to meet Toga, Eri, and Deku. Once Vlad King and Recovery Girl join us, we can begin our little impromptu meeting. You got all of our stuff to the rendezvous point? Toga asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she and Deku crouched together in a door frame. According to Deku's calculations, which were rarely wrong, they were perfectly placed out of view of any cameras. Deku nodded. All my computer gear, your knives, and the 3 pieces of clothing between the two of us, are all there. I hid them pretty well so no one should find them. Are you sure you want in on this? There's no turning back, you know. Shigaraki will eventually find out. You saw what happened to that girl. We can't just leave her here. And if Shigaraki knew about Eri and what she could be used for, I don't think he'd be much nicer to her. Deku frowned, but nodded. You're right. I'm sorry, Toga. I know that the League is your family. She shook her head. You and Magna are my family. If you think this is the right thing to do, then we'll do it. Besides, if Shiggy found out you helped Eri, he'd hurt you. And then I'd have to hurt him and I'd get kicked out of the League anyway. So this is better. Now, remember, we only have 15 minutes max before my time runs out after I drink the blood. You have to be ready, okay, Deku-kun? Got it? Let's do this then. Toga picked up the small water bottle and untwisted the cap. Deku grimaced slightly, watching the gauze float around. Inside the bloody water. They had known that if Toga had sucked the blood out of the gauze while it was still wet, then Toga would have only been able to be Eri for a few minutes during the day. What they needed was for her to be able to transform into Eri during the night, when most everybody was asleep. The blood would have dried out at that point and they hadn't done enough tests yet with Toga's quirk to know if dry blood would work. So, they did the only thing they could think of. They made blood-infused water. Shoving the gauze into a bottle of water, they had watched as the water had turned a hazy shade of pink. Toga downed the entire bottle in one go, stopping only to poke a finger in, hook it on the gauze, and yank it out to squeeze the last drops into her mouth. Looking away, Deku waited for Toga to take off her clothes and transform into Eri. After a moment, Toga, who now looked exactly like Eri, poked him and handed him the bundle of her clothes. He took the clothes and then pulled his phone from his pocket. With a few quick taps, all of the cameras in the Yakuza base went down, along with all other security measures, including the high-tech locks on Eri's door. Meet you soon, Deku said before hurrying away, leaving Toga to her part of the plan. Toga scurried off towards where she knew a guard would be, following the path she and Deku had mapped earlier. Letting the guard spot her, she let him chase her, shrieking and crying the whole way. Other guards and thugs were startled awake by the noise, coming out of their rooms to investigate. They were all too drowsy and disoriented to notice the small girl dodging through their legs. They were awake enough to notice when the first guard crashed into them full force, sending them all sprawling. This, of course, started multiple arguments, which led to at least 3 different fist fights breaking out. Toga giggled quietly as she slipped into the vent that she and Deku had unlocked for her earlier. From there, it was just a matter of climbing through the ducts until she got out of the building. Meanwhile, Deku was sprinting towards Eri's room. Just as he turned into the hall with her room, a lab door opened, revealing Overhaul. Scrambling, Deku ducked back around the corner, his breathing erratic. Overhaul manually locked the door behind him before he calmly walked down the hall away from Deku, yawning. He'd finished making the 5th bullet. As soon as Overhaul's footsteps had receded, Deku poked his head back around the corner. Seeing that the coast was clear, he hurried over to the door that Overhaul had just exited from. He paused, wondering if this was the right thing to do. He and Toga hadn't planned for this, but it was the perfect opportunity. With a final grimace, Deku used one of his gauntlets and sprayed a little acid around the lock. Once it had eaten through the metal, he opened the door and slipped inside. Without hesitation, he picked up the small box that held the bullets. Peeking inside, he confirmed all 5 were there. Deku glanced around the room, wondering if he had time to destroy all of Overhaul's research. After a brief hesitation, Deku pulled out a flash drive from his pocket and plugged it into the nearby computer. A few keystrokes later, the entirety of the computer's contents had been copied to the flash drive and deleted from the computer's hard drive. He pocketed the flash drive and then turned his attention on all the papers that littered the lab. It took only seconds for Deku to use his gauntlet to set them on fire. He hurried from the room and opened Eri's door, flooding the dark room with the light from the hall. Eri looked up from where she laid on the bed, her bleary eyes turning sharp and fearful as soon as she saw him. Deku closed the door behind him and slowly took his hood down. Then he pulled his mask off, allowing her to see his face. He smiled at her, his dimples flashing on his freckled cheeks. "Hi Eri, I know you don't really know me, and I know this is scary, but I'm here to help you. I need you to be a brave girl and come with me. Do you think you can do that?" She sat up in her bed, clutching the thin blanket to her chest. She shook like a leaf, though Deku couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from fear. Overhaul said I'm bad. I'm cursed. He's the only one who can help me. Deku frowned. Has he ever lied to you, Eri? About anything? Slowly, she nodded. He would tell me it wasn't going to hurt, but then it would hurt really bad. He'd cut me sometimes and sometimes he'd poke me with needles. And one time, he told me that I was going to get a really nice new bedroom if I was good for him. I tried really hard to be good. He even said I did well. But then he didn't get me a new room. I bet there were other times where he lied too, huh? I think a lot of people have lied to you about a lot of things, Eri. But I promise you, I am not lying. I am here to help you because I can tell that Overhaul is hurting you. He is the bad one, not you. If you come with me, I can take you somewhere that is safe. You'll never have to see Overhaul again. How can you promise that though? Eri asked. Overhaul said that he'd come for me. Well, I'm going to take you to some heroes. Some really good ones. They're strong and they can protect you from him. But we have to leave now, okay? Eri looked him over for a moment, her eyes calculating. Finally, she let go of the blanket and climbed from the bed, her bare feet padding on the cold floor. I want to leave with you, Mr. Deku. Shucking off his jacket, he wrapped it around her shoulders, leaving him in his t-shirt, cargo pants, and his gear. Eri took hold of the hoodie and pulled it tight around her small body, seeming to revel in the warmth of it. Putting his mask back on, Deku stooped down and opened his arms wide. Is it okay if I carry you? We need to move fast and I worry about you hurting your feet since you aren't wearing shoes. When Eri nodded, Deku moved another step forward and scooped her up, holding her close to his chest. Holding onto the hoodie with one hand, she wrapped her other arm around the back of Deku's neck and buried her face into the side of his neck. He pulled the hood up over her bright, distinctive hair and left the room, praying that Eri would never have to come back to it ever again. Deku hurried through the hall, knowing there wasn't much time before the cameras came back on. He needed to be out of the building before that happened, or Overhaul would know he was the one to steal Eri away. He was almost to the door when a knife sliced across his upper arm. Hissing in pain, Deku dodged to the side, wrapping his body protectively around Eri. As he twisted away, the knife flashed through the air again and came down on Deku's face, cutting him at his brow and sending blood flooding down into his eye. Thankfully, Eri was still wrapped in his jacket, so when the knife glanced off Deku's face, it didn't cut her. Finally distancing himself from the attacker, Deku turned and found himself facing some low-level, no-name Yakuza thug. The man's stance was horrible, his grip on the knife incorrect, but effective enough to get the job done. I'm not letting you steal what belongs to the boss, the man spat, glaring. Hand her over and I'll let you go. What are you hoping to accomplish here, dude? You honestly can't think that you can take me on, do you? I can take on some skinny brat. I'll take back the girl and the boss will see how valuable I am. This is my ticket into the inner ring. So hand her over and I won't dash. He was cut off as Deku launched one of his extra bracer cartridges at his throat. While the man gagged, struggling to SCK in air after having been struck, Deku activated the bracer with the gases, not really caring which one he sprayed the guy with. When the man swayed and collapsed to the ground, unconscious, Deku found he was slightly disappointed. He'd kind of been hoping it was the hallucinogenic one. Deku didn't wait around. He just pulled Eri in closer to his chest and hurried out the door. A moment later, the cameras came back on within the base, showing hallways filled with chaos and a little girl's empty bedroom. When Deku and Eri got to the rendezvous point, they found Toga waiting for them wearing a too large t-shirt and too small shorts. Do you have my clothes? Toga asked, hopping from foot to foot excitedly. Deku passed over the small bag and turned around, letting Toga change in private. As soon as she was done, she used one of her knives to slice the hem of her skirt and wrapped it around Deku's bleeding arm. Eri frowned at all the blood, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't want anyone getting hurt for me. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. This isn't our fault, okay? Deku said, giving her a little squeeze. You know, Toga said, still working to stop the bleeding from the cut on Deku's arm. It's a long walk to UA, and with you being hurt, it'll just make it even longer. That gives Overhaul too much of a chance to find us. Deku groaned. I know you're right. We really don't have a choice about this, do we? Nope. Now, I know you said we can't ask Shigi or Kurogyari for help. What about Twice? He'll blurt it out to Shigaraki. And Spinner is out too. He's way too loyal to Shigaraki not to rat us out. We need someone who will show up and not tell Shigaraki where they are going. We really only have one option here and it's not great. You mean Dabi? I guess we could call him, but I don't really see him helping us just to be nice. That's not really his style, Toga said, finally tying off the scrap of cloth. He'll do anything for a price, and I definitely have something he'll want. Call him. Within 15 minutes, Dabi was pulling up in a trashed beater, the engine sputtering and hissing. Leaning out of the broken window, he gave them all an unimpressed look. Eri burrowed further into Deku's chest, her whole body quaking. Toga said you'd pay me for help, Dabi drawled. What's the offer? Fishing a hand into his pocket, Deku pulled out the small box he had stolen from Overhaul's lab. Here's the deal. I can tell you some more information about Endeavor as a thanks for driving out here to listen to us. You can then go on your way and pretend you never saw us. Or, I can give you something that is in this box that you can use against Endeavor. To get it, you have to drive us as close to UA as you can safely get. I would suggest you not tell Shigaraki you helped us, if you value your life, and we'll make sure the heroes don't let it slip that you helped us. You also have to swear not to tell Shigaraki anything about Eri and her quirk. So, which option are you taking? Dabi carefully eyed the box in Deku's hand, feigning disinterest as he always did, but showing a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Whatever you've got there, is it good? How bad will it mess with Endeavor? Toga stepped up, smiling. It'll completely end his career. He'll never be a hero again. And with how bad it is, it's probably worse than death in his eyes. Without hesitation, Dabi unlocked the car doors. Toga climbed in first and took Eri from Deku, settling the small girl into the seat beside her. With some struggling, Deku climbed into the passenger seat in the front, sitting himself beside Dabi. Opening the box, Deku fished out one of the bullets and held it out to Dabi. This is a quirk-destroying bullet. Shoot Endeavor with this and he'll never be able to use his flames again. There is technically an antidote, but it was being produced by the Yakuza. With the way it's made, the other heroes will refuse to let Endeavor have it. How's it made? From me, Eri said from the back seat. Overhaul would take me apart and then put me back together, but he'd keep some of me for himself. Then he'd make it into a bullet. He made a few of the blue bullets but they got used up for tests. He only has the red bullets right now. Dabi glanced back at the girl, his eyes scanning over her bandaged limbs and cataloging every single one of her scars. Slowly, he turned back to Deku and opened his hand, letting him drop the red bullet into his palm. We have a deal. Can't believe I'm helping you brats play hero. You better not tell anyone that I have this, got it? If you do, I'll find out and I'll make you regret it. Completely understandable. Now, could you please drive? I really think I'm losing more blood than I would like. Dabi dropped them off about a block from the UA campus, pausing only long enough to wave Deku closer to his window. Deku leaned in, frowning in confusion. Listen, kid, sheet is going to be hard. Most heroes are BS. There are a couple good ones at UA, which I'm sure you know. Talk to them. They're more likely to listen to you, Dabi said. His blue eyes were serious, more so than Deku had ever seen. I'm changing my number after this, just in case the heroes are able to get it out of you too. But this bullet is worth more than a car ride. If you need help, then find a computer and track me down. You're smart enough to do it. I won't meet up with you, since I can't trust that the heroes aren't using you, but I can tell you some information or something. Then we'll be even, got it? Deku nodded before patting the side of the car. Dabi gave him one last wave farewell before peeling away from the curb and disappearing into the night. Toga carried Eri the rest of the way to UA while Deku kept pressure on his wounded arm, only stumbling twice. At the gates, Deku used a small pair of pliers to open the control panel and manually rewired the gates to open, letting them onto the campus. Standing on just the other side of the gate was Principal Nizu, a serene smile on his face. Hello. Please come in. Let's talk in my office. I believe we have much to discuss. Dabi held the small red bullet between two fingers, turning it back and forth, watching as the light moved across its smooth surface. He wasn't thrilled about Deku and Toga running off to the heroes. It wasn't a complete surprise that Deku ditched the league. Dabi saw that coming from day one. Toga leaving was a surprise, and it was definitely a shock that the two were skipping out to work with heroes. But Dabi also knew what it was like to be driven by pain. The two teens had been driven by abuse and suffering to join the villains, working in the underbelly of society to create a better future. And now, they were being driven by the pain of losing Magna, who they had both been close to, and the pain of seeing such a young child in need of help. He understood why they wanted to help her. They saw themselves in her. They wanted to be the person that they wished had saved them. Hell, Dabi had felt the same thing the first time he had met the teens. He had seen his own pain reflected in them, and he'd been drawn to it. It was too late for him. He knew that. But wasn't too late for them. They hadn't done the things he had. In a way, it was nice to see someone finally break the cycle. It was nice to see people escape from their abusers. After all, when Toga and Deku joined the league, they hadn't truly escaped abuse. No, they had just traded one set of abusers for another. They had just traded for Shigaraki and his mysterious sensei. Good for you kids, Dabi whispered into the night, pocketing the bullet and looking down on the dark, empty street from his window. Good for you. So you're telling me that these two kids, who are members of the League of Villains, stole this girl and these quirk-destroying bullets from the Yakuza? Vlad King said, eyeing Deku and Toga carefully. Toga was smiling at him, stars in her eyes. She had been doing that ever since he'd stepped in the room, her hand fisted tightly in Deku's sleeve. Recovery Girl had come in with Vlad King, shuffling along and grumbling about the hour. She'd planted a kiss on Deku's cheek without question, closing his injuries. A white, shimmery scar was left behind, splitting his brow. The bags beneath his eyes had darkened, his eyelids drooping as he got tired from the energy drain. Recovery Girl had forced a handful of energy gummies at him before trying to get Eri to come with her to the clinic for a full checkup. The little girl had teared up, not wanting to leave her heroes, but with some prodding and promises from Deku that he would see her soon, she'd eventually agreed to go with Recovery Girl, still wrapped tightly in the black jacket. Overall, it had been a very confusing 15 minutes for Shinso. Deku, who had been staring down at his hands, looking nearly catatonic ever since Eri left, looked up at Vlad King and frowned. Technically, I wasn't a part of the League of Villains. I'm a freelancer. Yet you lived with the League and worked for them? Vlad scoffed. I hacked for them and did research and analysis in exchange for room and board. They kept me safe, that was our deal. I also would work for a broker when he found people who needed my skills. I got paid for that stuff. Aizawa raised an eyebrow. Want to tell us that broker's name? Not really, no. My knowledge is probably the only thing keeping me out of H&D-CFFS right now, so I'm not about to hand everything over right away. Smart, Mike said, nodding. When he saw Aizawa shoot him a deadly glare, he gave him a shrug. Can't fault me for complimenting the kid. Kinkuin, what kind of blood is your favorite? Toga asked, nearly leaning out of her chair. Her grip on Deku's shirt was the only thing keeping her from tumbling to the ground. I mean, obviously human is the best, but it's so hard to get a bunch of it at once. So when Shiggy lets me drink blood, I usually just get whatever animal blood that I can. Pig is my favorite, but usually I can only get cow. Vlad King's mouth dropped open in shock, as did Mick's. Nizu, Shinso, and Aizawa were better at hiding it, but the widening of their eyes was indication enough that they were startled. Shinso, not knowing Vlad very well, was shocked that Toga thought a pro-hero drank blood, while the teachers were all shocked that she knew Vlad King did. What? How? Vlad stuttered. Deku grabbed Toga's arm and pulled her back closer to him, sending an apologetic smile towards the startled hero. Sorry about that. I told her about how you liked blood too, and she's been really excited about it ever since. Don't be surprised if she asks more questions. And how did you know, Deku? Nizu carefully asked, sipping at his tea. Well, it's sort of obvious, isn't it? Deku said, ping his head, making Shinso think of a sweet, curious little puppy. I mean, he has a blood quirk. A strong one at that. Most people with blood quirks have some sort of affinity for blood. With his fangs, it's obvious that he would have an interest in the taste of blood. Most people with a blood quirk who like drinking blood have a mutation to their mouth. It's like the main signifier for it. Like Stain. He had the tongue. Toga has to drink blood for hers, as you guys know, but she also needs it for her health. I think she might also be anemic, but I can't be sure. Wait, how do you know about Stain's quirk? Deku turned his eyes on Aizawa. Oh, I hacked the camera feeds and watched the fight. Your students are really effing stupid, did you know that? Nah, Toga giggled. You thought Todoroki made the right choice when we watched the fight with Spinny. Yeah, given his options he made the right choice, but he also shouldn't have been running into a fight like that with no plan or information. The dumbest one was the kid that went after Stain alone. He's the real dumbass. Right? The Ingenium knockoff. Ida. Shinso blurted out, not thinking. He's one of the smartest guys in our class. Deku fixed his green eyes on Shinso and gave him a lopsided grin. Ida? So he is related to Ingenium. Oh, it all makes sense now. Shinso went to speak again but stopped when Aizawa's hand came down on his shoulder. Looking up at his mentor, he saw that Aizawa was giving him a look Shinso had seen 1,000,000 times before. Aizawa wanted him to keep his mouth shut. Deku's grin only grew. Are you two related? You've both got mental-based quirks, similar builds, and similar facial features. The hair is pretty different though. And the activation for your quirks is pretty different too, so maybe not. Distant cousins? You do have a voice quirk though, so maybe you're actually related to Present Mike. Sorted out that though, you guys look nothing alike. Toga elbowed him. You're rambling again, Deku-kun. Oh, sorry, Deku said, a blush creeping up his face to his ears, making him look impossibly cuter. I can't help myself sometimes. An analysis quirk. Should have guessed, Vlad King said. He folded his arms and leaned back in his seat. Incorrect, Nizu said. He poured 2 more cups of tea and pushed them towards the young criminals. After a moment's hesitation, he poured another and passed it to Shinso, seemingly deciding that all the children needed caffeine and comfort. Deku's eyes went wide as he stared at Nizu, not touching the tea. So, you know. Nizu nodded. I knew as soon as I saw you. For the first time since Shinso had seen her, Toga lost her smile. She grabbed hold of Deku with both hands and bared her teeth at Nizu, clearly threatening him. Deku-kun is amazing, and if you try to hurt him, I will dash. Oh, I have no intention of hurting him. You have nothing to worry about, my dear. I have no intention of hurting either of you. In fact, I plan to offer you both a place here at my school. That caught everyone's attention. You can't be serious, Aizawa snapped. She tried to kill my students. And mine. Vlad snarled. I wasn't going to kill anybody. I just needed some blood. Nizu raised a paw, signaling for silence. These two risked everything. Their lives, their standing in the league, their home. All to do the right thing and save a little girl's life. Before you all arrived, they explained that Overhaul was planning to move their headquarters. They would likely have been gone before we arrived for the raid. Now that we know what time they are planning to leave, we can attack while they are unstable. There will also be less risk, now that there will be no civilians within the base. For a few years now, I have been pushing to have a villain rehabilitation program implemented here at UA. The commission pushed back and would not approve, stating that it was too dangerous, that most villains had no interest to be rehabilitated, and that there were no stable villains young enough for the program to work. But now, Deku and Toga have proven them wrong. With the right diet, and possibly medication, I believe Toga would be able to be an excellent candidate. Deku, with his brilliant mind, could easily see himself at the top of the class within months. There has been an open spot in 1A for some time, ever since young Mineta left after the USJ event, and there is an opening in 1B now that Tsunatori has completed her study abroad. Toga and Deku will fill these vacancies. Wait, Toga said, looking mildly panicked. We'd be hero students? Am I even allowed? Deku asked. I mean, I thought it was against the rules. There's no rule against it. Who told you there was? Mike scoffed. I'm pretty sure there are rules against kids with criminal records being in the hero courses. I don't have a record. Neither does Toga. Deku gave Mike a smile that was somewhere between self-conscious and smug. We've never been arrested. Fine. Kids with warrants out for their arrests. None of you know my real name. And I don't suppose you'll be telling us that, will you? You know me so well already, Eraserhead. Nizu cleared his throat, catching everyone's attention. We, as heroes, have a duty to help those in need. Right now, that is Deku. And Toga. If they were to return to the League, they could very easily be punished for what they have done. They need UA's protection, and that is what we will do. If you are all uncomfortable with the idea of them being in the hero course, I will find another way to keep them safe. But I believe it would be an opportunity to show more diversity within our hero course, which I know is something you have been campaigning for, Eraserhead. It will also help the current students to learn that they need to learn an individual's full story before passing judgment. I believe it will also help Toga and Deku learn to trust heroes again if they were to spend time with heroes in training. Additionally, it would be the safest place for them. If there was to be an attack, they would be better protected. And you also think that if we were to attack, the hero course kids would be better at protecting themselves? Deku chimed in. He didn't sound or look offended by this. He was just stating a fact. Nizu nodded, not at all ashamed. Precisely. I will be putting this to a vote, which is why I have gathered you all here. I wanted the input of both homeroom teachers, a student in the hero course, and a third teacher with less of a stake. This way, we would have a more diverse voting pool. What if we don't want to be heroes? Toga asked. Then you will be arrested and treated as any other criminal. Got it, okay, do your voting thing. Now, there would be rules and safety measures put in place, Nizu said, addressing the teachers again. They wouldn't be given free rein. Obviously, I will be voting to include them in the hero course, since it is my idea. Vlad, what is your vote? Sighing, Vlad looked over at the two criminals. Deku had his eyes downcast, avoiding eye contact. There was a nervous energy to him that seemed disproportionate for a simple vote. Toga was flashing Vlad a wide smile, but was still tense and clinging to Deku. Fine. Let them join. If they step a toe out of line, we arrest them. Mike. They're kids. There's got to be a story there of why they thought they had to be villains. I say give them a shot. Aizawa gave a groan and closed his eyes. I'm going to go gray early. I just know it. I'm taking that as a yes. Shinso? All eyes were turned on him as he took a shaky breath. I don't know how everyone else is going to feel. Doesn't feel right that I'm the one that has to speak for both classes. Maybe we should have Ida and Kendo vote. They're the class reps. Nizu shook his head. I chose you to do the vote because you are aware of the case and have been on it from the start. We want your honest opinion, Shinso. If you say no, we will just privately teach them. It won't be a problem, do you understand? Shinso nodded before looking over at the villains. They weren't so different from him. Toga had a villain's quirk, like him. Deku must have one too, since he seemed so scared of anyone knowing what his quirk was. One bad thing, one change in Shinso's life, could have been the difference between him being a villain, like these two, or being a hero. Who was he to judge them? Just give them a chance. They deserve that much. Deku gave a shuddering sob and folded over on himself, leaning into Toga. She wrapped an arm around his shoulders in an attempt to comfort him. Everyone else, besides Nizu, looked startled at the reaction. Carefully, Mike stood up and picked up a box of tissues from Nizu's desk and slid them over to Deku. Toga grabbed a tissue and wiped at Deku's face, smearing tears and blood across his cheeks. See, you can still be a hero, Deku. He was wrong. They were all wrong. It's okay, you don't have to cry. But can't Deku hiccuped, unable to get a word out. You can, Nizu said, a smile on his face. We'll help you. It took a few minutes for Deku to stop crying. In the meantime, Aizawa stepped into the hall to call Sir Night Eye to give him the update about Eri. They still needed to arrest the Yakuza, but the plan needed to be tweaked now. Mike had offered to make a new pot of tea while Vlad King went to get a blood bag filled with pig's blood to give to Toga. As he got up to go get it, Deku thought he could hear Vlad grumbling about how Toga obviously wasn't drinking enough and how her scent and color was off. Niza went back to looking over the support gear Deku had designed, leaving the three teens sitting together. Deku couldn't bring himself to look at the other boy. Not yet, at least. He remembered the boy a little bit from the sports festival. Deku had been really interested in how cool his quirk was and how cute he was. In the time since the festival, Shinso had put on muscle, enough that he was filling out his t-shirt and the sleeves were pulled tight around his biceps. Now, he was downright gorgeous and it wasn't fair. Deku knew how he looked. He was plain and had a boring, round baby face. His hair was messy, and not in a cool, effortless way like Shinso. He had some muscle but nowhere near the same amount as the Hero Corps students. He was too underfed to build serious muscle. He and Toga were mostly wiry, thin muscles. They were built for survival and that was it. Without his mask and hoodie, Deku had nothing to hide behind, so his watery eyes and tear-stained cheeks were on full display for the world to see. Overall, he looked like a useless, blood-covered crybaby, just like he had always been as a little kid. So, Shinso said, breaking the awkward silence. Which of you is going to go to which class, do you think? I want to go to Vlad King's. Toga said excitedly, bouncing in her seat. He's like me with the blood. Deku can go with Eraserhead. Deku whipped his head up, glaring at her. Oh, you can be in Eraser's class. There is no way in hell I'm going to 1A. Maybe we can both be in Vladdy's class. Niza looked up from the pile of weapons and gear. Oh no, we will not be having you in the same homeroom. I believe it would be best for everyone if you were in different classes. Toga will go to 1B and Deku to 1A. Deku, you would benefit highly from hand-to-hand combat training with Aizawa. Unless you have a reason why you shouldn't be in his class. Deku clamped his mouth shut and folded his arms across his chest. Glancing at Toga, they had a silent argument with only their eyes. Toga was begging with her big puppy dog eyes, while Deku was begging with his own eyes to not be forced into one. He really didn't want to be in there with him. But there was no way he was going to say anything to Nizu. The longer he could keep them from figuring out his identity, the better. Sure, Nizu might know he's quirkless and be okay with it, but who was to say any of the other teachers would be? They could all go to Nizu and demand he leave if they found out. No, it was better to fake having a quirk until he had made himself invaluable. Then they might not want to get rid of him. He'd just have to get to him in secret to tell him to keep his DMN mouth shut. With a final sigh, Deku nodded. Fine, I'll go to 1A. You like it, don't worry, man. They're a good group. Kind of loud though, Shinso said, rubbing at the back of his neck shyly. Deku had to fight down the blush that was threatening to flood his cheeks. Aizawa and Mike came back into the room at the same time, Mike with a fresh pot of hot water for the tea and Aizawa with a tired expression on his face. Night Eye pulled me from the raid. He wants me here to handle these two and the girl. Until we know all the details of their quirks, he wants me to keep an eye on them. Shinso, he said you could still go on the raid. You're to stick close to Fat Gum, got it? Shinso nodded. Am I excused? I know I still have a couple hours before I have to leave, but I might as well use this time to catch up on homework. Yeah, go. Don't tell any of the others about this. Night Eye will be telling everyone the basics of what happened, but the other students don't need to be worrying about this while on a raid, Aizawa said, dropping to sit back down in one of the chairs. And eat some real food for breakfast. Coffee doesn't count. Got it? I'll have coffee and a single grape. I swear, I will fail you if you don't eat a full meal. 2 grapes. Mike snorted and swatted at Shinso as he walked past, making the teen grin. Deku ducked his head again, knowing he had turned bright red. Toga hid a giggle behind her hand. When Vlad King came back, he handed Toga a blood bag with a straw poked into it. Deku thought it looked like a morbid version of a Capri Sun, but Toga seemed pretty excited. She took a big gulp and then gave Vlad a massive, toothy smile. This is so fresh. Say thank you, Deku prompted, elbowing her. All right. Thank you for the pig's blood. It's super good. Nizu poured a fresh cup of tea for Deku and handed it to him before going to rummage in his desk drawers. After a moment, he popped back out with a package of biscuits. which he sat down between the two criminals. Toga opened it and took a quick sniff before pushing it towards Deku with a nod. While he took out one to eat, she sniffed at Deku's tea and nodded again. "What's the smelling for?" Mike asked, sitting down beside Aizawa. He let his knee bump against his husband's in a reassuring manner. "Oh, Deku-kun gets nervous about taking food from strangers, so I check it for him," Toga said, pulling out a biscuit for herself. "I have a really strong sense of smell since I have to be able to tell when blood has gone bad. I can pick up more from blood than food, but I can still tell if stuff has been drugged. She can also pick up the smell of blood easier. That's why she didn't have to sniff at the stuff Vlad King gave her," Deku said before gulping down the tea. He scarfed down about 5 biscuits before he picked up the first cup of tea that Nizu had given him, which had long gone cold. He shot a glance to Toga, and when she nodded, he drank that down as well. Aizawa frowned even further, his brows furrowing with concern. Mike and Vlad bore a similar expression, watching the kids eat. "When was the last time you two ate?" Mike asked. "I was about to ask the same," Aizawa said gruffly. "Was also going to ask why you were concerned about your food being drugged. Did something happen?" Toga beamed at him, laughing. "It's such a funny story. So, like, the first week after Deku moved in, he dash." Deku lunged and slapped a hand over her mouth, which only made her laugh harder. "Shut up, Toga. No one wants to hear that story. And stop liking my hand, you know damn well it isn't clean." Actually, I think all of us would like to hear it," Mike said, looking even more concerned. Toga knocked Deku's hand off before sticking her tongue out at him. She turned back to Mike, looking borderline crazed. "Okay, so, Deku moved in and during the first week, we went to hang out with everyone else. We wanted Deku to meet the broker we usually worked with so we could get some gear for him and so Deku could get some jobs, you know? Well, the broker brought some dudes for Shiggy to meet, so it was kinda crowded and stuff. Deku was drinking a soda and someone slipped some sort of drag into it. Pretty sure the dude thought it was my drink, but whatever. Deku drank it and he got so high. Like, obviously he didn't mean to, but he did. And we didn't realize until he started talking about his childhood and stuff, which, like, Big Sis and I had told him not to talk about that stuff, so it was weird that he was. Then he full-on hugged Dobby. Started saying how warm and toasty and snuggly Dobby was. I pulled Deku off before he got burnt and the broker kicked out the dude that slipped him the drag, but it was hilarious. After that, Deku made me check all his food." Toga broke off into laughter while Deku was blushing and pouting. "That story is so embarrassing. Why do you always try to tell people about it? Because you get all red and it's so funny." It was only then that the two realized no one else in the room was laughing. Toga and Deku blinked at them in confusion. Toga, having spent years around criminals and villains while living on the streets, was used to these sort of stories being a source of comedy, while Deku was just used to being mocked. They didn't understand why the heroes didn't find it funny. Mike and Vlad looked green in the face while Nizu was frowning, a small slant to his brow over his beady black eyes. Aizawa looked stricken, his hands balled into tight fists. "So, you're saying a man tried to drag you, but instead drugged Deku? And the only repercussions the man faced was being made to leave?" Vlad asked, his voice quiet. "Well, yeah. I mean, it wouldn't have been the first time someone drugged me. It happens sometimes. Big Sis or Dobby would keep an eye on me and make sure I puked it all back up so it wasn't, like, a big deal." Deku nodded. "Yeah, and the one time I caught a guy trying to drag her, I took care of it. Why are you guys acting weird? You do realize it isn't normal to get drugged, right? I mean, for heroes like you guys, sure. But for girls like me, it's normal. The other girls my age that I would meet on the streets always told me I was lucky I only got drugged and always had people I could trust with me. Deku always says how I need to be better about checking my own stuff like I check his, but I forget a lot. And some people like boys," Deku said with a shrug. "Toga's found my drinks and food drugged more than once." Without saying a word, Mike stood and walked out of the room, the door slamming forcefully shut behind him. Vlad pinched the bridge of his nose, taking measured breaths while Nizu stared into the depths of his teacup. Aizawa was the first one to speak, his voice thick. "And the last time you ate? You didn't tell us that." "Oh," Toga said, pulling her straw out of her mouth. The Yakuza offered us some food, but they gave us weird vibes, so I would sneak out and get food for us sometimes. We eat just fine. She then shoved an entire biscuit into her mouth and crunched on it happily. Deku nodded along with her words. Yeah, we fine. I mean, it's probably not as much or as nice as what you guys eat, but everything combined is probably like 1 to 1.5 meals a day. It's less than what we had before we left home, but it's better than what a lot of other people get. We just didn't get to eat today, or I guess it's yesterday now, or the day before. I wasn't able to go out and get stuff, and then Overhaul was showing us what he was doing to Eri, and then we had to pack up and get her out of there, so we just didn't have time. Mike came bursting back into the room and dumped an armful of jelly packets, fruit snacks, and miniature bags of pretzels on the table, all of which were sealed. They scattered across in a clatter, making Deku jump in surprise and Toga flash her teeth, as though she was being threatened. Eat. What the hell, Mike, did you completely wipe out my stash? They're hungry. And this stuff is prepackaged so they can trust it. They need real food. Oh, so when you eat it, it's real food and a complete meal, but when I feed it to kids, it's not? Hypocrite. Deku narrowed his eyes up at Mike. Why are you being nice to us? Sighing, the teacher gave him a small smile. You guys are kids. I can't let you go hungry, and I don't want either of you worrying about being drugged, okay? Deku kept glaring as he picked up one of the jelly packets. Breaking the seal, he held it out to Toga, who took a quick whiff and nodded. Deku guzzled it down within seconds. Outside of the Yakuza base, Shinso and Kirishima were huddled on one side of Fat Gum, Tamaki on the other. The rest of the heroes and police were scattered around the perimeter, ready to move in and take out the Yakuza when they started to move. I still don't understand, Kirishima whispered. The girl was rescued and Aizawa has to stay with her? And how did she get rescued? I mean, none of us did it. Aizawa will tell us more later. We should just focus on what we are doing right now, Shinso whispered back. Does the girl have a weird quirk or something? That would explain why Aizawa had to stay behind. So if she gets out of control, he can turn off her quirk. Come on, Shinso, he had to have said something to you. Fat Gum flicked the back of Kirishima's head, making the boy flinch but grin up at his mentor. Fat Gum gave him a smile back. Keep your eyes on the mission. Here? We don't want to have any of these guys escaping. Yes, sir. Kirishima said enthusiastically. Tamaki nodded as well, though he kept quiet. He'd been quiet all morning, ever since they told him he wouldn't be in the same team as Mirio or Nijire. Shinso wasn't positive, but he was starting to get the feeling that there was something more between the three than met the eye. And after the revelation he had regarding being gay and being a hero, the idea of being a hero and in a poly relationship just made his head spin. He quickly packed those thoughts and feelings away in the back of his mind to ignore, just like he did with most of his emotions. Alright, remember boys. Stay together as best as you can. Fall back if you get hurt too badly. And if things go sideways, go for help. Am I clear? They all nodded up at him just as the Yakuza started to trickle out of the base. It was time. Vlad King and I are going to work with Nizu to figure out the details of you two staying at UA. While we do that, you two can get some sleep in here. Midnight is going to come in and keep an eye on you two while Shoyuta goes to talk with Eri, Present Mike said, opening a door. Inside was what looked like a nice apartment, though it had 2 doors, both on the same wall. When Deku pointedly looked at the second door, Mike smiled shyly. We wanted the kids to think that Shoyuta and I had separate dorms. Really, Nizu had an apartment built for us. That way we could still live together, but we'd be here in the dorms with the kids. Without hesitation, Toga was walking around the living room and looking at everything. As she went to pick up a picture frame, a small noise from the couch caught her attention. When she turned to look, a ball of white fluff perked up from behind one of the throw pillows. Gasping, she hurried over to the couch. A kitty, she whispered, putting her hand out for the cat to sniff. Oh yeah, we have 2 cats. That one is my boy, Sardine. Shows is around here somewhere. Her name is Dumpster. Deku snorted. Dumpster? Sardine? Hey. Sardine is a Broadway reference. Waitress is a great musical and I will fight you on that. And Sho named her Dumpster because that's where he found her. I think he originally named her that as a joke to annoy me, but the name stuck and now it's all she'll answer to. As if on cue, a fat tabby cat came padding from down the hall, meowing loudly. She wound her way between Mick's legs and then rubbed against Deku's shins affectionately. She likes you. Animals usually do, Deku said, kneeling down to pet her. She purred happily before trotting off again. Sardine was looking at Toga warily, his ears pinned back. Most animals didn't love her, so it wasn't a surprise that he was nervous. Something about her eyes and sharp grin screamed dangerous, even to animals, so they were cautious around her. Carefully, Toga ran her fingers across the top of his head. His blue eyes blinked at her a few times before he got up, stretched languidly, and then padded after Dumpster. Toga pouted as he left. So there is a guest room and an office that you guys can stay in. Show you to put a futon in the office and it's pretty comfortable. The guest room bed should already be made up, Mike said. He went over to a hall closet and opened it up, pulling some extra blankets and pillows down from a shelf. Actually, can we sleep out here for now? Deku asked, shifting from foot to foot nervously. Mike frowned. Wouldn't you be more comfortable on a bed or something? The couch out here isn't that comfortable. I'd rather not get locked in a small room in a hero's apartment minutes after meeting him. Blushing, Mike nodded and tossed the blankets and pillows onto the couch. I'll go get the blankets and pillows from the guest room. You guys can set yourself up here. I'll also see if I can find some clothes for you two to sleep in. Toga nudged Deku towards the couch. You should sleep there, since you got hurt. I'm healed now, it's fine. Well, you're probably still sore, so take the couch. Mike came back with extra pillows and blankets, letting the two kids divide those as well. Deku tried one more time to get Toga to take the couch, but she refused and instead built a nest of blankets and pillows on the floor. Mike brought them each a pair of loose gym shorts and t-shirts to change into. The clothes were way too big, but they were comfortable and soft, so neither of them minded. Toga took her hair the rest of the way down, leaving it tangled around her face as she crawled into the pile of blankets she had made. Deku flopped face first onto the couch and yanked a blanket over himself, so tired that he dozed off almost immediately. A little while later, a knock at the door startled both him and Toga awake. He bolted upright, his green hair smashed flat on one side. His eyes were wide as he stared at the door. Toga had also bolted up, but she had come flying out of the blanket pile and put herself between Deku and the door, teeth bared. Mike, who was sitting at the dining room table working on some paperwork, got up slowly. It's okay, guys. It's just Midnight coming to sit with you guys, remember? He said, his voice soft and gentle. When he opened the door, a tall woman stepped inside. She was wearing a pair of sweatpants and a tank top, her dark hair thrown up into a ponytail. She had a bag slung across her body that looked to be filled to capacity. Her glasses were slightly crooked on her face, but her smile was kind. Hey Mike, I've got it from here. Vlad and Nizu are in the front office waiting for you. As Mike left, the woman, who Deku assumed was Midnight, looked at the two teens and gave them the same warm smile. Hey guys. Sorry to wake you. They fed you, right? Mike and Eraser aren't great cooks, so they probably fed you junk, didn't they? I can make you guys something if you're hungry. Toga shook her head, letting her lips drop to cover her teeth again. She didn't stop glaring though. We're fine, Toga bit out as she slowly moved back to her blanket pile. Midnight wasn't fazed by Toga's posturing. Great. I'm going to be here at the table working on some stuff for my classes. You two get some sleep. With that, Midnight sat down at the table and pulled out stacks of papers and a laptop, setting it all up so she could work on grading. Deku watched her get settled, confused on why she was so relaxed. He and Toga were criminals. They'd done bad things and no one trusted them. Hell, at this point, even the League wouldn't trust them, they only had each other. Yet Midnight was acting relaxed, like they were just regular teenagers. When she caught Deku staring, she pet her head curiously. You good over there, hun? You're weird, Deku grumbled, before flopping back down to sleep. Toga snorted from the floor and curled up even tighter under her blankets. After the raid, the medics looked over everyone. Thankfully, there had been minimal injuries since they had caught the Yakuza by surprise. There were some bruises and cuts, but the only serious injury was Tamaki's broken wrist. A medic with a healing quirk took care of that in the blink of an eye, and all the students were released to go back to UA. Shinso and Kirishima went in search of the girls, not wanting to leave without them. It took a minute, but they managed to find Uraraka and Tsu being fussed over by Nijire. As soon as she saw them, she was in front of them and checking them over. I really don't like that they had first years on this mission, the older girl grumbled, poking at a bruise on Kirishima's arm. But I didn't get a say in it. Come on, let's find Tamaki and Mirio. We can all walk back together. Shinso let Nijire guide them to where Sir Night Eye was debriefing with Mirio, who had his arm tightly wrapped around Tamaki's waist. Nijire bounced up to the pair and slipped her hand into Tamaki's. Night Eye glanced over at the first-year students, a grim look on his face. I will be escorting you all back to UA. Eraserhead has requested that all of you, including the third years, come to the 1A dorms. He has information regarding the rescued girl that he wants to share with you all. All the students, besides Shinso, looked nervous. They all knew it was never good when Aizawa wanted to talk. As they walked towards the cars that Night Eye had called for them, Shinso slipped his phone out and texted Aizawa. We are on our way back. Everything good there? Within moments, Aizawa responded. I've mostly been with Eri. She will need to stay with Recovery Girl for a while. Kid is malnourished and dehydrated, among other things. The other two have been sleeping. Midnight stayed with them. Zashi and Vlad have been working with Nizu to get everything taken care of. There's a lot of paperwork. Shinso felt some of the tension leave his shoulders, knowing that everyone was all right. Slipping his phone back into his pocket, he got into the car with Uraraka, Tsu, and Kirishima. Centipeder was driving this car while Night Eye drove the other with the third years. When they got back to campus, Centipeder left them, saying he was going to handle some of the post-op paperwork. The ride had been quiet, everyone too tired to talk, and the walk to the dorm was the same. That is until they walked in. All of Class 1A was gathered, along with 1B, Vlad King, Aizawa, Mike, Nizu, and All Might were corralling the kids, trying to keep them from bickering and causing trouble. When they saw the work-study students, they only got louder. You guys are back. We were so worried. Mina shrieked, running over to hug Tsu. The couple went to sit in one of the armchairs, curling up together. Uraraka hurried over to Ida, who draped an arm across her shoulders and pulled her into his side. Shinso trailed after and sat on the ground at Todoroki's feet. Todoroki slipped a warm hand under Shinsu's capture weapon and rested it on the back of his neck. Shinso melted under the warmth, closing his eyes and relaxing into it. All right, now that everyone is here, we can start, Aizawa said with a sigh. Please hold all questions, comments, and outbursts until I have finished speaking. Is that clear? The teens all nodded, looking confused and nervous. When he was sure they were all paying attention, Aizawa continued. Be aware that everything I am about to tell you has been approved of by all the teachers in this room. Sir Night Eye, the hero at the back, is also aware of everything I am telling you and agreed to this course of action. I will not be telling you all the details, as it is a part of an ongoing investigation, but I will tell you what I can. The League of Villains formed a partnership with the Yakuza, sending two. I hesitate to call them both members. Nizu cut in, smiling slightly. We will refer to them as contacts for now. Fine. They sent 2 contacts to work with the Yakuza. While the 2 were there, they discovered that the Yakuza were abusing, torturing, and using a young girl by the name of Eri to create not only quirk-erasing bullets, but quirk-destroying bullets. Eri has a quirk called Rewind, and they were using her DNA to destroy the quirk factor in the target's DNA. The League contacts did not approve of how Eri was being treated and, knowing the rest of the League would not help, they reached out to me to ask if I would save Eri. What these contacts were not aware of was that Sir Night Eye and his agency were already working to take down this sect of the Yakuza. The information that the contacts, or I guess informants, told me was enough to form a task force to raid the Yakuza, which a number of the work-study students were a part of. The raid took place this morning, which is why some of your classmates are still in their hero uniforms. Late last night, the head of the Yakuza, who is known as Kai Chisaki or Overhaul, showed the informants the process of how Eri's DNA was extracted to make the bullets. It was a highly dangerous and painful procedure that left Eri with injuries. Overhaul then told the informants that the Yakuza base was going to be moved. The informants realized that if the Yakuza moved, the raid would be ruined. That, or if the raid happened at the same time as the move, Eri was more likely to get hurt. So they made a plan. They took Eri and ran from the Yakuza. They brought her here, to UA, and they both turned themselves in. They are willingly working with UA to stop the League by providing information on them. In light of the actions the two have taken, and due to their history, we are allowing them to stay here on campus as wards of UA, just like we are with Eri. The two are around your guys' age and will be students in the hero course, one in each class. We will be initiating a villain rehabilitation program that Nizu has been working on for a number of years. Precautions will be taken to keep you all safe, and at no point in time should any of you be alone with either of them until we tell you otherwise. Aizawa paused, taking in the shocked faces of the students. He heaved another sigh. These two have risked a lot to help Eri and to help us. Without them, there would have been many more injuries during the raid today, and possibly even deaths. They have given up everything they know to do the right thing. They are here to learn and to grow to be better people, the same as all of you. I'm not saying you have to be their best friends, but I'm asking that you at least try to not be mean. I'll take questions now. They were all silent for a moment before Momo cautiously raised her hand. Sensei, who are they? Do we know them? She asked in a timid voice. One was not an active member and considers himself more of a freelancer, so none of you will know him. The other, you guys do know. It's Himiko Toga. We don't have the legal name for the other yet, but he goes by Dash. Deku? Bakugo shouted, startling everyone. He leapt to his feet, his face pale and his eyes wide as he looked past Aizawa to the hallway where Midnight was leading a messy-haired Deku and Toga towards the common room. The two criminals had been rubbing sleep from their eyes, but at Bakugo's yell, they jumped and gaped at the gathered students. OF Dash, Deku whispered,